be a little bit late this morning. So let's go ahead and begin with facts. Staff, thank you.
Yes. Good morning, Council. Yes, we are going to be starting with Transportation Department. It is located on page B153 of your budget books. The service impacts for the Transportation Department, actually no, the type of funding for this department is Enterprise and Internal Service, with the Fleet Division being contained within this department. The total budget is $135.3 million. That is down 18.3% from last year. The general fund, they have no general fund within their department. Their total positions are 508 positions, which is 15.75 greater than in FY17. Their total position count is 512. The service impacts for this department under total resources are projected to be $183.35 million, approximately 7.5% less than FY17 amended, primarily due to the completion, the substantial completion of the Bus Rapid Transit project in transportation capital. That is the primary cause of the change in the revenues. Under the expenditures, they are anticipating an increase of approximately $3.69 million above the 17 amended. That's spread rather evenly between the personnel, non-personnel, and interdepartmental charges. Primarily in the personnel area, there is a full-year funding for various positions that have been approved in FY17 as a part of the service expansions and the increased bus frequencies. These positions are now being fully costed at 1.0 FTE. Also, the department is going to be adding one staff assistant position for additional administrative support. The non-personnel increases of $1.18 million. Part of that is for proactive outreach for the service enhancements that were implemented this year, and also additional funding for software and hardware upgrades, also for bus sanitation services, and $500,000 increase to the fuel line items, a reduction to the diesel fuel, but an increase to alternative fuels as the department has begun shifting from diesel-powered buses to compressed natural gas. The interdepartmental charges are also increasing by about $1.2 million. Primarily, the $1.3 million increase is for the reimbursement to the police department for the additional fax officers that will be implemented this year for the Bus Rapid Transit service. There's 8 police officers and 1 police sergeant. Also included in that reimbursement are equipment, vehicles, and ancillary costs for those positions. They are a total of $151,000. As far as the capital projects are concerned, again, there's a substantial decrease, and this is driven by the significant completion of the Bus Rapid Transit project. Other projects contributing to the decrease include the Manchester Transit Center remodel and the courthouse part reconstruction. Also, as far as the Fleet Division, they are proposing to increase staffing by 2 heavy maintenance equipment mechanics and 1 power generation operator mechanic. Also, they are anticipating additional funding for pass-throughs for vehicles that are being purchased by client departments. That is also reflected within their budget. That concludes my presentation of the highlights of the transportation budget, and I believe the staff is here to address any other additional concerns.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll go ahead and go out and solicit public comment on this budget item. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the council on the transportation budget? Please come forward. Of course. Rick, give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Rick Stites, President, Business Agent for ATU and Business Agent for CFPEA, representing transit supervisors and bus drivers. I'm not opposed to this budget. I am pleased that the department has the ability to fund more police officers, not only for the protection of the employees, but for the surrounding communities that the BRT will pass through. I'm looking forward to the next year. Hopefully that our new expanded night service can be improved on. perhaps enhanced, going from one end of the line to the other instead of just center sections. Also, I believe that in the next year, hopefully there's enough money in the budget where the existing service on our regular routes can be improved, frequencies adjusted, and overall just provide a better product for the citizens of the city of Fresno who ride public transportation, and make it appealing enough where more people will ride. And that limits my concerns and comments.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council? Please come forward. Okay, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and return it to council. Member Baines, you're starting us off.
Thanks, Council President, and Mr. Transportation Director. You know,
Wait a second. This is Parks Director.
Wait, I thought he was a city manager.
Oh,
Morning, everybody.
Mr. Transportation, Parks, and City Manager.
Yes.
Hey, couple quick. I want to kind of Rick kind of queued up some of the stuff that I was going to ask about. He just kind of lofted it out there, but I definitely wanted to first, foremost, get a BRT update as far as the all the infrastructure work we see and going on up and down the BRT corridor. It looks like it's coming together. Are we on schedule? Are we behind? Kind of where are we at with that right now?
So from a construction standpoint, we are, from a budget, we're about 50% expended to date. There is a lot of activity. We did experience a significant amount of delays as a result of the number of days that it rained. So right now, we are probably, from a construction standpoint, looking at a completion of sometime around December, maybe January. And right now, based on the recent data that I've looked at, we should anticipate BRT going into revenue service probably closer to February, March, rather than later this end of this calendar year as a result of those delays. There are some other integration issues that we need to address as well. So while from a budget standpoint we are online with our budget financially, we have slipped on the schedule for actual implementation or in service of BRT.
Okay, so and most of the delays were due to the number of rain days we had this year that weren't anticipated. Okay, good. All right. So we should be operating early next spring, is what you're saying?
First quarter. Yeah,
first quarter
or it would be the third quarter of our fiscal year.
Okay, and have any of the projections, ridership projections, been changed or updated or amended?
No, we haven't changed the ridership projections at the time that we developed the BRT business model. I can tell you that my cursory review of the department is that ridership has continued to decline over the last year. What is interesting is the fare box revenue has remained relatively flat. So that intuitively doesn't make sense. So I need to drill down further. Our Fax 15 on Shaw Avenue has actually reacted positively, and we've seen a slight increase in ridership. But
so let me just, because that's an interesting point. So on our Fax 15, we're seeing a slight uptick, but regular service we're seeing a decline.
Continue to decline, yes.
But that is but the fare box numbers are staying consistent.
Relatively flat, yes.
Any guess at all?
That is one of the. There are a number of different issues that I'm looking into right now. That is the first one. I think there's some opportunities to improve ridership by readjusting the schedules. The schedules right now have some things that are just questioning. For example, our Cedar Avenue Fax 15 is terminating somewhere around Fresno State rather than going all the way to River Park. And the anecdotal information I've received so far is that a lot of people are choosing to just take your standard Route 38 rather than take the Fax 15 service on 38 because the standard bus will get you, or this regular service will get you all the way to River Park. Well, that does. If that's the case, then we should be making adjustments to extend that service all the way to River Park. So there's some other opportunities within, I think, in the entire system to increase ridership. I've looked at the on-time performance, and the on-time performance of the system has also gone down since the last time I looked at it. So some of the loss in ridership may be due to the issues such as on-time performance and the schedule. So I think there's some real opportunity, and I'm working with staff to adjust the system as it is currently providing service, and then the next step is to develop a schedule that complements BRT when it goes into service later on next year.
Now, is the on-time performance, are we seeing buses arrive too early, or is it more like, do we know which side of that they're on? It's late, okay.
Yes.
Okay. And do we know what, anything, any
Not
idea?
yet.
Not yet? All right.
I will tell you it's on my list of things to find out.
And I know that we're in a very broad route restructure. Where are we at in that community process?
Staff and I have met with the consultant to look at the scope of work. There was some work included in that after the restructuring was approved by council that I've asked them to take out of the proposal. That's going to reduce the expense by about $80,000 to $90,000. And then I've asked them to revise the community outreach rather than going into council districts. I'm going to provide them a list of 5 to 7 different stakeholders who are actively part of the conversations about restructuring services such as public transportation, and ask them to host community outreach events so that we can get a broader conversation rather than go from council district to council district. I agree with some of the council members' comments that you're going to end up meeting with the same people. Well, if that's the case, then let's have those people help us facilitate that conversation with the community rather than worrying about going to each council district, because they'll be able to convey to us what they think is what adjustments we need and where.
No, I would wholeheartedly endorse that approach, bringing our interested parties to the table and coordinating with them. When do we think we're going to start rolling that out? Did I miss that?
I'm hoping to bring that proposal back to council within the next 30 days. I'm waiting for the revised proposal back from the consultant.
Okay. And so, and just so kind of count, we're all up to date, because we talk about this whole route restructuring thing for a long time. We've been having this discussion for a couple of years now, and I have learned to understand this process. It's not as easy as we're just going to decide to restructure our routes. It really does need to go through a full public process and allow the public input. So after we go through the public process and they've given us input, then what happens after that, just kind of procedurally?
Once they've given us our input and we've done the assessment as to what impacts, if any, the changes would affect certain neighborhoods, then we will come back with a recommended final service and service area and route structure. The initial restructuring that council viewed was based on a break-even or cost-neutral approach. Again, because of the changes in funding that's coming primarily from the state of California, I think there's some opportunity to provide additional service that was not originally contemplated because of the fact that they have additional operating resources available to them that were not available about 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so does that mean we could be extending service in some areas?
We might have some opportunities to introduce some new service, yes.
Okay, well, and I'll just say this for the sake of that discussion. I wasn't always necessarily of the approach that it had to be cost neutral. I know there's some council members that feel differently about that, and you probably do too. But I am very interested in, and I know we have a debate about whether or not to extend service to some of our job centers that are really on the outskirts, and I don't have that problem in my district per se, but I know Councilmember Brandow does over in the El Paseo area, so stuff like that. I think there's one other that I'm trying to remember, but
Inspiration Park.
I mean, not necessarily a job center, but I mean those types of issues that we're talking about. So I'm certainly open to figuring out how to do that, and I think it needs to be, we need to be at least presented with the option of what that looks like, and if it's going to cost us more, then we need to fight about it out here and say that we value that that's where we're going to place those dollars. But night service update. So I want to hear about I know you've been a proponent of night service. I mean, for a long time, as a matter of fact. I think last time you were the interim transportation director, we were talking about night service. This time that I was here, you were the interim
Actually, I was the transportation director when we introduced night service. So night service, the ridership has been struggling, but again, I think it's the system and how that service is extended. It is limited.
What are the limitations of the night service?
It's literally 4 routes, and that really does create some challenges for people who are trying to get home because of the last point or drop-off point. So what I'm going to be doing with staff, and it was interesting, it was a recommendation that came from staff, is that when we were running night service, the system seemed to meet the needs of the community far better. And so it may be that we just go back to what we were doing in 2010 or even before that and just reintroduce that schedule. There's a couple of...
Let me just quick. I'm just curious, what were the differences in that schedule and this one?
Well, that schedule actually ran the service, the entire system, rather than just a selective routes later. We didn't run as late, but we ran the entire system. The way you can potentially address that last mile is through other options rather than running the entire fixed route system. Mm-hmm. Can we work with our paratransit provider, because it's a general public paratransit service, to provide that last mile? And before anyone gets real excited about this other idea, is that I think there's a real opportunity to maybe partner with someone like Uber or Lyft to provide that last mile trip rather than running the entire system, hoping that you get somewhere close to where someone lives or works.
That's an interesting concept. So is that model being employed anywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been looking, and there are a number of transit agencies who are now utilizing Uber and Lyft to provide that, what the industry is calling that last mile.
And that's interesting. I would submit, and I'm gonna go back to your ridership, the decline in ridership. I would submit that maybe the presence of Uber and Lyft could be part of that, particularly with our younger riders.
Yep.
I can tell you that it's cheap for them and it's quick and convenient. So, again, as you factor in where some of the decline, I would just say just new modes of transportation for people are probably contributing to that. And really do like the idea of maybe partnering with Uber and Lyft, to provide that last mile that probably is more cost effective, for the whole system all the way around. So if we would go back to the old night service model, how long do you think before we make those adjustments?
We're probably looking at, now you're really going to make my staff nervous, probably looking at...
You're going to make them nervous.
Yeah, well, they're already nervous. Early fall when we do that.
Okay. And finally, Bruce, I mean, I don't have any issues with the budget per se, but what do we want to talk about the permanent transportation director search. When are we going to start that?
I think we're going to, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, we'll go out with a search.
All right, I'm going to hold you guys to that. Y'all know how I am. We do these interim positions for like a year.
Yeah, well, that ain't going to happen.
Well, good. On the public record, as you said. And then what kind of challenges do you see coming up this next year? I mean,
So as I share with my staff, the first thing we need to do is just get back to basics. And we need to be constantly monitoring and watching things such as on-time performance. What's our ridership? Where's our ridership? What's shifted in the market? Uber and Lyft is a good example. Travel patterns have shifted. The There's a reason why we're continuing to lose market share. We need to ask the question as to why. And some of it may come down to just basic things, such as if 1 out of 4 buses is late, that's a challenge. We need to fix that. We can talk about BRT, we can talk about partnering with Uber and Lyft to the last mile, but we've got to get back to dealing with the basic core service and making sure it's performing as best as it can. Is our fare structure appropriate? I'm pressing staff to find out whether or not the new fare box system that we've installed has the ability to reduce fares, let's say after 6 o'clock. Do we go, do we charge $1? Do we do something different? What do we need to do to entice ridership? The schedule is a good example where I point out, if the Cedar Avenue service that runs every 15 minutes terminates pretty much at Fresno State, and the majority of your riders want to get further north to the medical offices, the hospital, or River Park, then we need to adjust that schedule in order to attract or retain ridership. 15-minute frequencies is convenient, but only if it's convenient to those who want to use it and it takes them where they want to go. So the next 30 to 45 days, there's going to be a very deep dive into the on-time performance, our schedule, and why it is that we are losing ridership and what do we need to do and develop those strategies to improve the on-time performance and start building back ridership on those corridors that have historically been the bread and butter of the department.
Well, I couldn't agree more with everything you said, and I'll end my thoughts like this. There's always a great debate on this dais and really around the country on the need for public transportation. Does it work? Should we be subsidizing? Should we not subsidize it? Should we pay for it? And my friend here is, of course, wanting to privatize it in my ear. But what I would submit is that this is a very important public service that we provide to our community, and we should always be providing this public service to our community and try to do it at the highest level and highest qualities possible. And we, particularly as the folks that are seen as the leaders of the city in the decision-making process, should be supportive of that in every way that we can. It is a vital necessity for the workforce, for education, for the ability to use our needed amenities in the city, and we should be very, very serious about making sure that our citizens can move about this city easily and reliably, and take advantage and full use of everything that we have to offer. So I'm fully supportive of the Transportation Department, as you guys have already known, for those reasons. And I look forward. I know there's some challenges. Glad to hear that, to some sense, we're going to be getting back to basics, as you say. I know that's an overused cliche, but I understand it from the sense that you're coming from. And I want a permanent transportation director sooner rather than later. So anyway, good job, Bruce.
Bruce,
Sure.
a.k.a. City Manager, Facts Director, Parks Director, Corvette Extraordinaire. I got a couple questions, and my colleague, Councilmember Baines, pretty much covered a lot of stuff I was going to ask with regards to BRT, but I wanted to talk a little bit. Do our buses currently have Wi-Fi features in them?
We did a pilot Wi-Fi. I'm not sure if it's up and operational. We have one. But BRT will be equipped with Wi-Fi.
Okay, so and it'll be free of charge.
Yes.
Our riders will have that, because I think that'll make it quite marketable, especially when we're talking about millennials and just their approach to things and their lifestyle. Great, because I remember last year Fresno Unified did a couple of buses with Wi-Fi, and obviously we put in filters and all that, and it was actually pretty effective for kids to catch up on homework. Do we know what percentage of our ridership are students, either go to our school district or Fresno State or community college? I mean, is that something that we've tracked or tried to track?
Well, we used to track, but I'm getting that we haven't been. So I'm going to play on the freeway. Back in the day, ridership from just Fresno Unified was somewhere around the 20%, if not a little bit higher.
So we'll have Wi-Fi on BRT.
Yes.
What about the other routes? I mean, is that an option?
That is an option later on. Again, it's the ability to. And I'm going to need to sit down with my technical folks, but I believe we're going to probably run it across a cellular backbone, because to try to run it off of a system that is. So let me back up. There will be free Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi at each BRT station,
Okay.
and then free Wi-Fi on the vehicle. So what I don't know is how you transition from that network, because you'll be one network running at a station and then another network on the vehicles. But there is an opportunity in this day and age to expand that. I just can't give you the detail as to how that trade-off occurs when you go from the stop to the vehicle.
No, and that's great. And part of the reason was I wanted to flag that for our folks so we can start looking at it, because I think that will be a big plus for folks choosing to write that. And so along those lines, when I used to wear my other hat as a school board member, I know that a lot of our students were riders for the city bus system. We used to have the tokens that every student would receive. Have we explored establishing more of a formal relationship with not just Fresno Unified, but Central and other school districts, as far as us being a partner with them in transporting a lot of these students, especially with Fresno Unified being now a choice school where you can essentially go to any school that you choose across the city. And I know that school districts are mandated by law to provide transportation. I think there's an opportunity there for a lot of cost savings on their end. We're already providing the service. I think there's value in exploring that. Maybe that could be one of the topics we talk about during the board liaison act that Mayor Lee established in those conversations, because I think there's a lot of opportunities there for that. Or have we had that conversation? Maybe we already have.
Fresno Unified each year buys a significant amount of bus passes, tokens, things of that nature. We have a program currently in place with Fresno State where all the student has to do is basically show ID. There's a little chip or proximity card, and each time they get on the vehicle, we basically are able to charge Fresno State. We now have, the council just approved this, with similar program with Fresno City College, same thing. So the next opportunity to expand upon that, again, because of the technology and the new fare boxes, is to enter into a formal agreement with Fresno Unified and Central Unified, because rather than just buying a bulk number of trips, they can actually track and monitor who's using it and where and things such as that, and we can give them a better number rather than them guesstimating how much it's going to cost them every year. And through that, the goal would then be is to enter into a long-term agreement for those to acquire those trips from us directly.
So I think the BRT is going to be an amenity that a lot of students will want to ride, especially if they can do homework and do some research while on our buses. And then the last question I had has to do with one of our contractors, HandyRide. How has their performance been with regards to serving our community?
That is a performance number that I'll have to get back to you on.
Okay.
In the last month, I have been focused on what's going on with Fixed Route. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about HandyRide, so quite honestly, is it on my radar? It's kind of like the folks in my maintenance division.
Sure.
They're not on my radar yet, but they know they will be, so I'll have to get back to you. Off the top, based on the input that I've received from my staff, they're performing well, but again, that's anecdotal and just more intuitive than anything else.
Because I know I think it's 40 plus vehicles that they operate for us around there. So, okay, yeah, well, we'll talk about offline on that. Thank you.
Hey, quick question. This was on my notes to ask, but I forgot to talk about paratransit, and Councilmember Chavez reminded me. So when is our paratransit contract up again?
2 more years? Two? Yeah, 2 more years.
2 more years. Okay. All right. And well, I guess we're a couple years away. Okay. Well, that's an important. Rick, you hear that? We're 2 years away from the paratransit contract. I think from all understandings and indications that I have, our transit department is interested in figuring out how they can at least enter into a competitive process with that. And I wanted to know when the next contract was up. So I see that smirk on your face, and we'll talk about it later. Thanks.
Somebody else's issue.
And I see your smirk too, Rick, by the way.
No problem. All right, I've just got a couple of questions and / comments, but I think the whole, from my understanding, ridership decreasing is not a Fresno only problem. So ridership on public transportation has been going down. I know California for sure, nationally, probably nationally too. So that's not just something that we face and trying to figure out.
And sales of trucks and SUVs are way up.
Sales, and yeah, and we'll get into alternate fuel vehicles later too. But okay, we have so a couple of thoughts as I'm sitting here listening to a conversation about buses again. As we've delayed this whole conversation, well, we haven't delayed it. We've kind of nitpicked at it for a couple years now. Now we're getting to the. I think we're almost getting to the area where we're. That our society is moving beyond our concepts of public transportation. And then what worries me for myself and our colleagues is we might be choosing to superfund a dinosaur that's kind of passing away through the evolutionary process. So I worry about that. So I wonder now if we should begin the conversations with Uber and Lyft before we pull the trigger on our next big adventure in Fresno public transportation. I mean, I think we should have those conversations sooner rather than later, rather than execute a bunch of projects and expenditures and kind of going blindly into the future on public transportation. So we already know that we might need them for the last mile. Maybe we need them beyond that. Maybe we need them for extended service and then at night. I don't know. Maybe we need them for the students. I do agree with Councilmember Chavez that when I rode, I think it was about a year ago, I rode buses in North Fresno just to get an idea what was happening out there. Most of our students, or most of the ridership, and it was about 13 people on the bus, but most of them, like 10 or 11 of them, were getting off at City College. So they were riding from North Fresno to City College. So beyond just Fresno Unified or Central Unified, maybe there's a partnership opportunity with community colleges too. So I just noticed that from North Fresno, that might be different ridership models throughout the city. So I am a little worried about all the stuff that we're about to, all these continuing conversations happening when we're not really maybe fully aware of why ridership's going down and the best way to address that. But I'm going to leave all of that for another day. Let's look at on page B160. It starts talking about the staff detail and increases and a couple of decreases, and then on 161 it talks about bus rapid transit. Estimated number of positions is 16. On 161, Bruce.
Okay.
And is that 16, is the inside of that 16, is that part of the police officers funded inside of there, or is that on a different page? I don't know where the police officers that are overseeing.
These are drivers, correct?
The 16?
These are bus drivers.
Okay. And so if we're going to be completed in January, when are we hiring these drivers?
We'll probably start hiring them October, November.
Okay. Make sure they're up to speed with all of our standards and everything by the time. Okay. So where is the funding for the
So as
police
Jane-
department?
As Jane said, that's a transfer into the police department, so of about 1.2 million. 1.3. Oh. 1.3. So
Okay.
yes, FACTS is a proud sponsor of the general fund, and
Yeah,
you'll
yeah.
probably be hearing that we are looking also to sponsor some existing or maybe even new shot spotter services.
Yeah, fantastic. Good deal. Let me see here. Okay, Jane, so it's just a fund transfer.
Yes, it is.
Right.
It's on, and it's detailed on page 156.
156, good.
Yeah, the 1,347,300. There's an increase to interdepartmental charges to reimburse the police department for the 9 officers. Well, 8 officers and 1 sergeant.
Okay.
For a total amount of how much? 2 point something?
I believe it.
Yeah.
It's over $2 million.
So you talked about the community outreach when it comes to the route ridership
Yes.
stuff. That's the area of community outreach I always find extremely sketchy, because that's just a lot of people's opinions and not necessarily experts. So my question is, leading into that, what are the parameters that we're going to look at to repurpose these routes? Are we going to look to extend service? Are we going to look to serve ridership?
Well, the first priority or first parameter is to evaluate how any of the proposed changes would impact different communities, different neighborhoods, especially those that are disadvantaged. Because under FTA, under Title VI, you have to evaluate if you remove service or change service, eliminate service, what that impact is to that neighborhood or that segment of the community, and how are you going to mitigate that. Then the next thing you would look at, are there changes in activity centers or demands or things like that that require you to adjust your service accordingly. So, for example, we know that there are a lot of trips that were going into Manchester from some of the outlying routes. Mm-hmm. Since Manchester is no longer is under construction, putting those trips back or that service back into Manchester probably doesn't make sense. There's some cost savings. So those are the other impacts that we have to also measure, is whether or not we put that back. And then it's based on demands and changes in travel patterns, or land use. Is there a new service that you need to look at? So in the case of your district and Councilmember Soria's district, there's development that's occurred west of 99. Most of our service east-west is the only access to those neighborhoods west of 99. There is no north-south connecting service. So that is an area that we're going to need to evaluate. As the city has allowed development to occur, just like everything else, including interchanges, what is the level of public transit that should be provided, and how can you possibly do that within the existing budget and service area? So it will look primarily at the impacts of the proposed changes, and then again, those proposed changes were based on the highest return on investment, in other words, where you would generate the most increase in ridership, how those changes impact those disadvantaged communities, and then how do you mitigate that? And then the third would be, is there an opportunity to provide other service, either new service or a different way of providing service in order to meet the needs of your customers, such as Uber or Lyft.
Such as
an Uber or Lyft option.
Yeah,
Some transit
right.
agencies have done that. That's why I said. And that conversation is going to actually, has already started. In fact, the COG runs a senior script program. Mm-hmm. And about 6 months ago, they were going to spend about $80,000 to develop a software system for local cabs that similar to what Uber and Lyft provide. And my response was, well, if the cabs companies want to do that, they should develop the same software that Uber and Lyft does. We shouldn't be subsidizing cab companies and developing that software tool.
Did they take your advice, or did they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So as a result of that conversation, we've also had subsequent conversations that the COG should enter into agreements with Uber and Lyft to provide senior transportation services in addition to cabs, because for some caretakers, especially those who have dealt or are dealing with aging parents, I can tell you personally that I had some real challenges with the taxi script program, and this, if I would have had an Uber or a Lyft option available to me where I could have scheduled those trips for my aging in-laws, I certainly would have done that rather than the current system. So I am very confident and hopeful that as time goes on and within the next year, you will see other service options, including the senior script program, in which Uber and Lyft are an active participant in those programs.
And Bruce, when it comes to figuring out where the route should be, do you have faith in our staff to figure that out, or do you think that we need to go out and hear a bunch of voices from the community?
We need, well, again, under Title VI, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do any kind of restructuring and not potentially get sued, you need.
We have to do it.
You have
check
to,
off a box.
It's a legal requirement.
Right.
So we need to go out and do it. I welcome the input from the community, but like a lot of other things, at the end of the day, someone's going to have to make a decision based on the amount of funding available and what someone ultimately believes is the best option for the community. And I have confidence in my staff, and I have confidence that what we can bring forward to you is the best that we can provide. And again, it will not be based on just solely doing the same thing that we've always done.
And the consultant that we had a couple years ago, was that Jarrett Walker?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's like at least 2 or 3 years old now, but that study showed us that if we want to serve more people, to condense the extent of our bus routes and put buses on the street faster, or faster headways.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
And he's a sub-consultant to the proposal that we will be bringing back to council again within the next 30 days.
Perfect. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Council President. Just wanted to echo some of the same comments that were made earlier by my council colleague Oliver Baines in terms of the importance of servicing. And, you know, I know that I've been in conversations with you guys for a while now since the park was being built. And so I'm hopeful that we can find a creative solution to address the lack of access in terms of public transit for all individuals with that are able to enjoy the park, that have disabilities, but also abled people. So hopefully we'll get that resolved. As you mentioned, you have a plan to do that. The other thing, I believe that you mentioned that we already finalized something with Fresno City College in terms of the bus passes for students, or how is that going to work?
They'll just be able to show their ID, and there'll be a little sticker on the back of that ID that the fare box will be able to read, and then that trip will be recorded, and then we'll send a bill to Fresno City College, State Center Community College District.
Perfect. And when does that go into effect?
Where's Greg? Oh, it hasn't? Okay. Oh, I thought it had. Okay. So the contracts come to council next 30 days? So we're looking at fall.
Okay, perfect. And I'm excited about that. That's why I asked, because I know that we had talked with the previous director, and I was like, we need to look at, I know that what you guys had been doing with Fresno State, so I thought it would be a great also opportunity for us to partner up with Fresno City College. So I'm excited to be able to go through what you guys will be presenting on Thursday and see, you know, if this will also continue to help us increase ridership. I know that, you know, I actually work at Fresno City College, and I know a lot of students drive, but a lot of students also take the bus. And I think that by us having a partnership, that may create an incentive for students that are currently going, or other folks that may not have the transportation to get to school, but now they will have access to transportation because of them being a student. So I'm excited about that. The other question I just wanted to get into, the public outreach that you mentioned. So I know you just said that you're kind of changing the scope of it and kind of the plan in terms of using those folks that have been engaged in the public transit conversation. And I noticed, I think in page 156, you guys have allocated about 40,000 increase for proactive outreach. Are you guys going to be partnering up with these nonprofits and like contracting with them, or are you guys just kind of going to go to them and tell them to help you guys do the work, but not entering into any contract?
I don't know if we're going to enter into any contracts. $40,000 is not a significant amount of money. The outreach
I think it's
that we just, and I'm looking at this, but the restructuring has its own outreach component. So this $40,000 is for additional outreach. Again, for what? Oh, is that what it's for? Okay. So we're hiring Resources for Independence and Hope. And this is when we go back into A and B and L Shelter, which is going to be in August in Manchester.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of the outreach also, just to increase ridership, what's the plan? Are we going to be doing like a media campaign? Are we trying to do a social media campaign? We know social media campaigns can be pretty effective, especially with younger people. Do we have any plans to do that?
Well, first, we have to figure out what we need to do to increase ridership. And then, of course, once we develop a list of strategies, then we'll certainly, a community outreach or a social media component will be part of that. But it comes back to, we first got to figure out why the ridership has declined and what can we do to entice people to start using fax in the future.
Yeah. Okay, great. The last thing I'll just say, because I do represent west of the 99, I think that it's going to be very important for us to figure out how we do service them. I know that right now we have very limited in any of the bus routes, just like you said, go from east to west. Right. And so figuring out within the constraints and then seeing if there's other opportunities. But I think that, this council, as we continue to see the city grow and how we're allowing that, we need to be very mindful of that, because then we end up where we're at today, where we're trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out, to get a bus to, one of our newest parks out, west of the city. And so it's just going to be important to have those conversations. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the screen is clear. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments as well. And it's great to see our leadership team from FACTS here today in attendance. I know that you guys have a tough job from the top person of this department all the way down to the folks who clean our buses and maintain them. So I know that everybody does a really good job, and you guys are always under the microscope and on the firing line. So I appreciate the good work that you all do. That being said, I have a couple of questions and a couple of observations as well. Mr. Rudd, tell us about, let me frame it this way. The bus rapid transit system is something that many people in this organization have put a lot of work into. Not just work, but heartache and a lot of attention over hundreds and hundreds of hours over a number of years. I've written down a couple of items here talking about ridership being flat, talking about we're losing market share, a lot of these concerns that we have. Since I have you all here, I'm just going to share with you that the bus rapid transit system is dead on arrival if as an organization we can't rectify what is going on Blackstone between Shaw and Princeton. In terms of losing market share, in terms of flat ridership, folks are going to find out real quick what's going on at Dakota and Blackstone and Shields and Blackstone and Princeton and Blackstone. Some very, very grave problems, and these problems with vagrancy, with human trafficking, with gang activity, drugs, are the word will get out quick. That BRT is not it's not safe to wait for a bus in front of Carl's Jr. at Griffith and Blackstone. And so take me through the the addition and implementation of the fax officers and what they will be doing. And then, and I can submit this to you before you answer your question, will there be a coordinated strategy? Is there a strategy for these fax officers? Is there a strategy to protect this part of the line especially? Because I think that without a coordinated strategy, our fax officers are going to be like rhinoceros, stomp this fire out, and then there's a fire over here and stomp this fire out. And we can't go on like that. And so my question for you is, will there be, explain to me how the fax officers are going to be integrated into police work, and then explain also if there's going to be an integrated strategy for policing and cleaning up this area in particular. Because I wouldn't want my wife to run out of gas in this area. And I'll be that blunt, and the situation is that serious out there. So with that, I'll leave it to you.
Well, thank you. You actually are touching upon the primary reason why the department is contributing another 1.3 million to the police department by adding another 9 officers, a total of 18 officers in total.
So that's 18 fax officers.
18 fax officers.
Up from 4, 3 years ago. It was
4 to 6.
Yeah, 4 to 6. Okay.
So in other words, the general fund is recognizing about a $1.8 million contribution from the enterprise, not counting the other $300,000 and so coming from DPU. In other words, there's 21 positions that are now funded from the enterprise departments. But let me get to your question. Yes, there is a strategy, and one of the underlying reasons to hire additional officers is to deal with those areas such as Dakota and Blackstone all the way up to Gettysburg. Yes, there is a strategy. It is called in some ways community policing, or what we call around here neighborhood revitalization teams. In discussions with the chief and discussions with Jennifer Clark, these officers in a lot of ways are going to have enough time during the course of the day to actually meet with residents, merchants, business owners, identifying where those problem areas are, and then developing how we're going to deal with the issues that you pointed out. Is there an approach from code enforcement? Do we become far more aggressive with the issuance of what we refer around here as our MORPO letters? I've talked to Councilmember Baines. The focus of these officers is to make the BRT corridor, whether it's Blackstone, downtown, or Ventura, Kings Canyon, in combination with other city services and other community stakeholders, some of the safest areas in our community. Those officers are going to have at their access to code enforcement, housing authority, the county of Fresno, as well as the police department. And these problem locations are going to become the target or the intense focus of this team. But it is not like anything else in this community. This whole idea of community policing or dealing with issues within the neighborhood is not the sole responsibility of the police department. It is going to take this organization and a concerted effort by this organization to deal with the root issue, which is why within probably the next 30 days you're going to be dealing with things such as single sales and conditional use permits, recycling centers, and other challenges that are impacting not just that particular part of the community, but other parts of the community that are also faced with similar challenges. Councilmember Baines has an area in Chinatown that's been impacted. Councilmember Soria has some of the similar issues at Shields and West. So the advantage as city manager is that I'm able to see the field, the entire field, and this idea of adding fax officers to help ensure that our drivers are safe and to help also ensure that our riding public is safe is one outcome. But more importantly, having those resources available to work with other city departments to start addressing the root issues that is continuing to impact the environment in which a lot of our residents choose to live.
You had a question.
I wanted to just follow up on, because I think it was a great comment in terms of what is happening out there. And so
Thank you.
I know that last
I think
time
the
I
first
gave
time
you,
you've ever said that.
I know, for real. Yeah, probably the last. Anyhow, just wanted to follow up on the adding of the positions of the public safety positions in particular. We have had such a challenge in hiring enough police officers. So at what point do you anticipate having these positions fully staffed and actually, using
Well, we
up-
actually are funding these positions, unlike the other 12 there in the budget that are not funded until May of next year. With the fact that we can afford to fund these now, we anticipate those positions will be on board sometime around January.
So in 6 months, we will have the positions filled, you believe? Even with the attrition rate that we are experiencing?
In my discussions with the chief, he's got a number of students already in the academy or going in through the academy, and he has conveyed to me that he believes that we'll be able to fill these positions. Now, the challenge is that if we, as we discussed as a completely secondary issue, is that if we are successful in filling these positions faster than the attrition rate has been historically, then we also will not have the salary savings that are projected in this year's budget, which may create problems for us later on.
But not for these 18 positions?
Not for these 18 positions.
So
no.
that would be our priority. Let's fill these 18 positions. These officers will be in the BRT corridors. That's what we're looking at.
Our priority is to get all the positions filled, but from a budget standpoint, there's no reason why we cannot fill these positions. They're fully funded.
Okay. And then just one last question.
I just want to jump, then you come back, but now we'll get you, Bruce. So these 18 positions, the fax officers, obviously, so there'll be 9 on and 9 off, right? So we're talking about 9 positions working a shift.
I let the police chief
Okay.
and his...
Okay. Are they going to be in the marked vehicles that say
Yes.
fax? Okay, so they're not going into the patrol pool. These are going to be on. They're going to have their own mission. The council can look at this as like a special unit.
Yes.
Okay.
City
that's-
manager can look at it as a special unit. And I will tell you, they'll either be in black and white, they'll be in cars. And
Okay.
I've actually had a recent discussion with the chief last week about actually putting 2 positions on on motorcycles.
Okay. But the reforms that were instituted, I guess, 18 months, 2 years ago, to no longer have fax officers respond to. So the reforms are still in place. Remember when we had the fax officers responding to fender benders with our buses, and it would take them all day to write the report? They're no longer doing that. Motors are doing the.
Well, they will still. It depends on how many calls are pending for everybody else.
Okay.
If patrol has, and we've seen it, 50 to 80 calls pending, then of course our fax officers are going to help relieve that. So our rest of our patrol
Right.
officers can respond to those other calls, because you also get calls that I've been waiting for a police officer for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and nobody showed up. So it will be a coordinated, facilitated effort. But I want to emphasize that these officers, same thing with our student resource officers, they'll be working with our neighborhood revitalization teams. Councilmember Capriolio has one in El Dorado. And so what we are doing is we're, more importantly, in addition to providing additional officers for the BRT corridor, we're augmenting this strategy of dealing with those issues that are impacting neighborhoods by providing those resources from whether it's the police or code or it's attorneys or whoever, because and adjusting or coming back with recommendations to deal with the root cause. Because whether it's someone waiting for a bus stop or it's our police officers, if they're going to the same location over and over and over, and I'll use Manchester Transit Center.
Okay.
If we're always constantly going to Manchester Transit Center because of some kind of behavior or something happening there, what is the root cause? What is the what is the catalyst for that activity occurring? It's not just the bus system. It's something else in that neighborhood, and we need to start addressing those issues, because if not, our officers are going to just be running from call to call to call to call, because we're not dealing with the problem that is really impacting those neighborhoods. And you pointed out the one that we also need to talk about, and that's some of these clinics and the activities that occur around these clinics.
Right. And I appreciate that, City Manager. I appreciate that you see the big picture, and that there is a number of associated issues that we have to tackle as an organization if we're going to alleviate that. You know, I know that Member Soria has another question for you, but just in terms of, you know, I chose to bring these questions up during the transportation part of the budget and not during the police part of the budget, because I think that, you know, I'm concerned from our last time we had this discussion, we were talking about recovering, you know, making sure that we recover our 20% at the fare box to continue to receive the federal money. So I'm concerned about that. And with all due respect to my council colleagues who have problem neighborhoods as well, the marquee project of this organization is running through that Blackstone corridor. And in my view, the most serious, in my view, every problem that we face as a city, the microcosm of that problem exists in a concentrated form on Blackstone between Gettysburg and Clinton. And so I believe that as an organization, it's important for all of us to understand the problems that are being faced there and to get behind them and work on addressing those soon as we run our signature project through that particular place. And so if we're talking about ridership, and if we're talking about you know, being flat, and we're talking about attracting new riders, they're not going to be attracted to that until we address, as you said, in a comprehensive way, single sales and the place and our police as well. So I do appreciate that very much. So go ahead, Member Soria.
I was just going to ask, because I highlighted here as part of the addition of these officers that you guys are also looking at doing community-based policing in that area. Is there a strategy? I know that we've talked a lot about community-based policing, but I don't think our city has yet been real successful in community-based policing in my perspective.
Right.
So is there a different strategy? What are you guys going to be doing to really do true community-based policing in that area, or in those areas?
That's what I was mentioning, is that it is difficult for a patrol officer to do any kind of really community-based policing if they're running from call to call to call. The fact that FACTS has the ability to augment and add additional officers who will be focused on the Blackstone, Ventura, Kings Canyon corridor allows them, that since they're not on patrol, it allows them to start dealing with those issues that are impacting that corridor. That means they have the opportunity and time, more importantly, the time, to meet with business owners, residents, even to the point where if you have an issue and work with the POP officers, that they'll be able to leave their cell phone number. And so they'll be able to go into the businesses and go, how are things going? What's going on in this neighborhood? What do we need to know about? They'll be able to establish that one-on-one, that rapport with that constituency, which is not something that we've been able to do, which is, of course, in my humble opinion, is the cornerstone of community policing. It's establishing that relationship, and more importantly, that level of communication and level of trust with those officers that allows them then to come back to, whether it's a neighborhood revitalization team or the city manager's office or whatever, going, okay, here's this particular issue or issues in this neighborhood. This is what's impacting the quality of life. How do we as an organization want to address this? It could be revoking of a CUP. It could be sending a MORPO letter. It may be just sitting down with that other business and saying, you know what, you're really creating an impact. You're negatively impacting. How are we going to deal with this? Because you're affecting the neighbors, your customers, as well as the adjoining businesses. That is what we believe will come from this investment in additional public safety, other than just adding officers to patrol.
I have a couple more items, and then I'll be done. And I don't know if necessarily this question is for City Manager, but I have a couple of line items that raised some concerns for me, so I don't know who that would be. 56262, alternative fuel. This one goes from, in 2016, actuals $500,000 and then jumps up to $1 million. Can you tell me why alternative fuels, what is this for? What does it do? Why does alternative fuels double?
It's primarily, if you look at, probably our line item for diesel has gone down. And what we're doing is just basically reallocating the cost. I think the next order will be 100% compressed natural gas.
Okay, so by next quarter, we won't even have diesel vehicles anymore.
There's only maybe a handful of diesel buses left in the fleet. Everything else is running on compressed natural gas.
Okay. On the next page, that was 194. On 195, 58016, membership and dues goes from $15,000 to $120,000. Must be a heck of a club.
I've looked at that line item. It appears that there was either a misposting last year for the $15,000. In other words, it got posted to the wrong line item, or we missed a payment. But those payments is the California Transit Association and the American Public Transit Association, and APTA, and I believe CTA as well, is based on what your operating budget is.
Okay. All right. I mean, I understand, because I think maybe when I first came on council, I would have said that, that's not a good use of money. I do understand some of the help that professional organizations can give an organization. But when I see things like this, I always think, that could be another employee, a cleanup employee to go out and empty waste baskets at bus stops, which is obviously our first priority. And then I found one more on 53302. This is outside consulting, goes from $0 to $1 million.
So
what's that for? The BRT?
Well, I can tell you what it's for. I'm going to also tell you I'm not sure that we're going to spend it on that. There was $1 million set aside, I believe, to hire a consultant to evaluate the acquisition of some property that would be used for bus turnarounds. We haven't even done the restructuring of the system yet, and haven't even brought that back to council. So that while there's a line item that says $1 million, I can tell you right now that I'm not confident that we're going to end up spending $1 million just to go hire someone to go tell me where a bus turnaround should be. I think my professional staff and myself, I will figure that out, and I'll save you $1 million.
Thank you. That's awesome. And then the final question I have for you: Are we budgeting more for cleanup and maintenance, emptying waste baskets, cleaning bus stops? Are we?
You have 2 more positions?
2 more?
Yeah, we're at 2
more.
more
Well,
positions.
this is a good budget then. Thank you.
Let me also add,
that's all it takes. We have to run a clean service, and everybody knows that.
I would be remiss, probably within the next 30 to 45 days, as a secondary discussion, we've been talking about naming rights. Well, I guess our consultant has come back and has identified, I guess, low-hanging fruit. Well, the BRT corridor happens to be the first area they think there's a potential to generate $250,000 to $300,000 a year in net new revenue. Now, from the general fund side, okay, I guess it helps offset the cost of those officers, or maybe some additional shot spotter. But you'll see an item coming to you within the next 45 to 60 days that'll increase, which has identified a new revenue source for the department that they have not used in the past. So we'll be bringing that to you in very short order.
Well, I do appreciate it, and I know I can speak for my colleagues up here when I say that we love things like maintenance crews, and we love things like cleanup crews, and we do appreciate it, because those are the kinds of calls and emails that we get. Hey, why don't you empty your trash cans, kind of thing. And so we know how much, you may not hear it, but we do. And we know how much folks appreciate it when the stops are clean and the vehicles are clean, and we know you do a heck of a job delivering that every day for us. So, and when I say us, I mean the people of this city. So thank you all very much, and thank you, City Manager, for your time. That's the end of facts, folks. Thank you, staff. Our next item is Airports Department. Take it away.
Airports begins on page B17 of your budget book. It is an enterprise department. Its total budget is $39 million, which is an increase of 17% over last year. It receives no general fund. Total positions in FTE is 99.05, which is an increase of 2.7, and the total positions in count is 105. This is more or less a status quo budget. There is a reduction in transfers as far as revenue transfers are concerned due to the final gap settlement transfer from the general fund that will be done this year. So there is a reduction of $804,000. There is some minor increases to operating for the repair and maintenance of aging systems and other equipment. Also, a $289,000 increase due to contractual obligations for previously approved contracts and software that are required for day-to-day operations. There's also $12,700 for body camera maintenance and data storage, $22,000 for the expansion of the TSA required access control system, and $33,500 for the communication center relief as mandated by the FAA. There's also some minor amounts for various operations and maintenance items, cleaning supplies, passenger amenities, expansion of the ambassador program, price increases to associations and memberships, increases to marketing program, and increases for training and safety practices. Increases in interdepartmental charges are primarily for the acquisition of 2 vehicles for the building maintenance staff, $162,000 for the federally mandated aircraft and firefighting station contract with the Fresno Fire Department, various increases for computer and network needs and equipment, and also the debt service is also decreasing by $163,000, aligning with the actual debt service payments that are anticipated for next year. The capital appropriations are increasing by almost $5.5 million. This can be attributed to the increase to the taxiway C construction scheduled for FY18. That is my presentation. I believe the staff is here to address any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go out to the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to address this budget item? Please come forward at this time. Okay, seeing none, we'll return it to council and close public comment. Member Capriolio.
Thank you. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
And could you add anything to what we're talking about today? I'm really, really proud of you and the contributions you make, not only to the city, but District 4 in particular. So I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you. Just Jane did a great summary, and it pretty much is status quo. Some of the things she articulated in terms of our kind of O&M is based on the fact that we have been growing. I mean, airports, our airport, as with all airports, are drivers of economic development. You know, the Raleigh-Durham Airport and their director recently did a study, and they determined at their airport one domestic flight is equal to bringing in a $20 to $30 million company, just one flight. So the good news is we're growing 23% in the last 5 years, and this budget reflects the fact that we are growing, and of course there is wear and tear on the facility. So this budget will continue to keep us viable and into the future.
If you need anything else, be sure and come back. I'm always available for, well, everybody, but you in particular as well. So keep me posted.
Absolutely.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good morning.
So I had a couple questions with regards to the port of entry designation for our airport. I know we've had a couple of conversations with regards to that. We have, is it 2 international flights currently, the ones that go to Guadalajara and Mexico City?
Guadalajara, yes, two carriers.
So my question is, what would it take for us to expand that option? at the airport, particularly with the customs. I know we briefly touched a little bit on that, but the officers and how much that would cost and what the process would be with the federal government.
That's an issue we have been working on since 2006. So there's two issues here. One of them is the port of entry status, and what that really means is that the Customs and Border Protection pays their own way, like they do at every other airport in this country except for ours and Orange County John Wayne. We are actively working, I would say, more aggressively this last year than we have in the past on that issue. We've engaged Orange County, in addition to us, have engaged our congressional delegations with regard to Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Committee in Washington to add language that requires Customs and Border Protection to designate those airports that have more than 75,000 arriving passengers, and we're over 100,000 port of entries. Now, what that means to us, it's not a staffing issue, but we pay about $750,000 a year for their salaries for their operation. If we didn't have to pay that, I've already told Customs and Border Protection, I'll take that money or a portion of that money and pay for additional officers to expand the shift time. In other words, instead of an 8-hour shift, a 10-hour shift or an 11-hour shift. The airlines have already indicated they will add destinations and they will add frequency into Mexico if they had the expanded shift time. Right now, with an 8-hour shift, we're maxed out at about 3 flights a night. And so, and the airlines are taking advantage of that. In fact, coming this December, Volaris is adding a new destination to Morelia. If you go into the system, you're going to find that. So they're going to start Morelia service in December, and we're pretty excited about that. They're going to work it into the existing schedule, work with Customs and Border Protection. So it's an ongoing process of port of entry, but I almost think a bigger challenge is how do we get additional CBP staff here, because they're going to come from somewhere. Are they going to take them away from San Francisco? Or are they going to take, because we're in the Northern California area, are they going to take them away from San Jose, Oakland? And, of course, those airports can go, wait, our wait times are already too long. We can't, so it's a tug of war, if you will. So, but my focus is shifting more towards that resource of more bodies to expand the shift. I'll tell you one thing we will be doing, is changing the time. Instead of an 8 p.m. start time with the officers, go to a 7 p.m. shift time start, and that will open up some additional opportunity for the airlines.
And I know that there's a big value in having a airport designated as a port of entry. As far as plans for what you'd like to do in the next couple of years, we've gone to a couple of expansions out there at the airport. Do you feel that the runways we have now can accommodate those large cargo planes, larger carriers? Is that already in place, or is that something that we need to work on long term?
Great question. We are right in the middle of a master plan for the airport, which will evaluate not only the airfield but also the terminal facilities and parking. And I can tell you from an airfield standpoint, it's in really good shape. It's got the proper width. It's got the proper length to accommodate just about any type of aircraft that may serve our market. I mean, it can accommodate 757s, 767s, even 747s. It's got the length to do that. That's not an issue. So I think from an airfield standpoint, we're in pretty good shape. I think when you look out in a 5 to 10 year window, I think the facilities is where we're going to need some capacity growth. Parking, gates, ramp space, terminal, baggage claim. Our master plan is going to look at that 5, 10, 20 year window. My gut feeling is, yes, inside of 10 years, we could be looking at somewhere north of a $100 million project, and we've already got a financial plan in place to make that happen, to accommodate this growth on a projected path. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we can accommodate an anomaly. We have a new entrant airline that has a whole bunch of new flights. That's a whole different ballgame that we'll have to address. But I think we will need, in the 5 to 10 year window, some expansion. And probably, I would say, early 18, we'll have that data and information.
Well, and I think what makes us really remarkable is with what we're trying to do as a city, and with the mayor leading the initiative and bringing distribution centers here. I think that'll be a big selling point for Fresno, and trying to be more competitive with the surrounding areas and neighborhoods. And so I appreciate that feedback. Last question I'll have, and this is probably one of the most common questions I get out there about the airport. When are you going to bring another carrier that goes straight to Vegas, other than Allegiant?
In fact, last week I met with 7 different airlines, and I do this every year, and I communicate with them on a regular basis. But these airlines, the existing airlines we have, plus other airlines that currently do not serve our market, are well aware of that Vegas opportunity. But it's not within their strategic plan at this point in time. California is a hot market for the airlines, and their focus is into the LA basin, into the Bay Area, not so much kind of spreading out. I can tell you I handed the media release for Ulta, and I handed the media release for Amazon to Alaska Airlines last week, and they were thoroughly excited about that. We've been preaching the fact that we've been doing a lot of economic development work over the years, and we're starting to see some of the fruits of that labor show up. I put it in front of Southwest Airlines. They were excited about that. Ulta is based out of the Chicago area, Illinois, and Southwest is a major hub in that area. It doesn't mean that they would go there at such time in the future when they want to serve us, but the point is we are growing. We have an MSA, or Metropolitan Statistical Area, of now close to 1 million, and that's kind of this mental trigger point with the airlines. So we are growing, and we are really the only airport of choice in the valley, short of going to the basin or the Bay Area.
Right. Okay, thank you. That was the only question. And just with your administrative hat on, I flew the other day, and I counted the minutes it took from the time I got off the plane to the time I was able to get my bag at the conveyor belt, and that was 12 minutes. That's pretty good.
That's really good.
Thank you.
Screen is clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to the Development and Resources Management Department. Your turn now. All right. It's all yours.
Thank you. This budget begins on page B43 of your budget books. The service impacts, as far as the revenues go, the department's general fund revenues are increasing by approximately $1.2 million compared to the FY17 budget. The significant increases include building and safety services revenue, which are increasing by $265,000, planning revenues, which are decreasing by $166,000. Revenues are primarily aligned in that case with the estimated revenues for FY17, less a standard 3% decrease that follows a building code cycle. Rental housing division revenues are budgeted at $1.2 million. Budgeted revenues reflect anticipated revenues for the program's first year of service. Code enforcement revenues are decreasing by $233,000. That's primarily due to the movement of some revenue over into the rental housing division. Parking revenues are increasing by a little over $1 million, or 19%, primarily due to the parking rates that were adopted in February of 2017, the additional parking meters along Fulton Avenue, and the discontinuation of a revenue transfer to the stadium debt service. The department's grant and entitlement program revenues are decreasing by almost $5 million. This is primarily due to a lower than anticipated carryover. These revenues fluctuate quite a bit year over year based on the availability of funds and the potential for reprogrammed or rebudgeted funds. The detail on that is on page B48. The expenditures for non-personnel is a decrease of about $5.8 million, excuse me. Almost $3 million of that is due to the one-time purchase in FY17 of the Acela, or the land management system. That is no longer a part of the budget, and so that expense is now gone. The other expenses in the non-personnel category include the creation of operating budgets for the asset program, the reactive rental housing program, the proactive rental housing program. All of those have been included in the proposed budget. Those are detailed on page B49. As I indicated, the initial acquisition cost of Acela is no longer within the budget. However, there are funds in there for the continued implementation as well as the system's ongoing costs of approximately $690,000. Those are also detailed on page B49. They also have some minor expenses that have been eliminated. Those were also one-time expenses for last year, including code books, code training, and some seismic building fees, also for a fee study and other scanning services, etc. Going on to the page B50, there is a schedule there that will detail out the current usage of the CDBG program. I will let the director go into more detail on that. There is also appropriations for high-speed rail of $3.1 million, which will support relocation assistance, entitlement processing, as well as the station area plans. They also have a new contract with Pacific Gas and Electric, or a recurring contract with Pacific Gas and Electric for the Sustainability Division. That is also within this department of approximately $2.8 million. Parking capital is at almost $1.2 million. This is primarily due to carryover projects that are also in place, and according to the parking study that was done back in January of 2016, those projects are also on course to be completed. Interdepartmental service charges, there are various increases and decreases. There's an increase of $176,000 in information services charges, mostly for the operating expenses for the various programs that are being implemented this year, the asset program, proactive housing, sustainability staff, etc. Also, there's an increase in telephone services, again, for the operating budgets for those new programs. Finally, under fleet services charges, there are some additional increases, again, for the asset program vehicles and additional funding for the proactive rental housing program vehicles. As far as staffing is concerned, their personnel budget is increased by about $2.2 million, significantly due to the annual funding or complete funding of positions that were added only partial year in 2017. They also plan on the conversion of a plans and permit technician from a permanent part-time position to a full-time position. And also the positions that are being added as a part of the proactive rental housing unit, those are detailed on page B54 of your budget book. They include 2 senior community revitalization specialists, 8 community revitalization specialists, a staff assistant, and a housing program supervisor. The Sustainability Division will also add an engineering tech to address increase in collaborative sustainability partnerships. And the Parking Division will be converting a parking meter attendant from a permanent part-time position to a full-time position. Finally, in the HUD Division, there is a significant difference this year. They will be funding the Neighborhood and Revitalization Unit from the general fund rather than CDBG. This has come as a consultation with the federal audit that is more appropriate that this unit be funded out of the general fund rather than CDBG. They are also decreasing the number of teams that will be funded from 3 to 2. And that will generate a savings of $289,000. There will be no impact to existing personnel, however. Again, that is detailed on page B55. That completes my presentation. I believe the staff is here to address any other questions. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm first up on the screen anyway. So I'll tell Clint. I just wanted to, Jennifer, if you could, I wanted to start off by saying a couple of things and kind of putting it out there so the public knows that the council and mayor's office, along with DARM staff and the city attorney's office, council members Caprioli, Osorio, and I, along with the city managers, mayor, and city attorneys and DARM staff, have been working very closely and intently. There's been a lot of discussion about the effectiveness of code enforcement in Fresno. A good discussion. a fair discussion. And
I'm sorry, point of order.
I was first.
Well, let's go out to the public real quick. 'Cause we have to go out to the public. So
Thank you. I forgot all about that.
it's okay. I have one yellow card
To
from
be continued.
Eric. Are you here? Eric, come forward. Give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Eric Payne, 1444 Fulton Street, Torrey Associates. I'd like to thank the City Budget Office for working so hard to develop this document, and to the City Manager and the Mayor's Office for getting us here. I first want to say that this is not about left versus right, but there are certain things that are not left and right, but they're at the center of authentic moral values, like love, like justice, like mercy, and like caring for the least of these. A budget is a moral document, and our faith tells us that the moral test of a society is how we treat its poor. As a city, we face difficult choices, but whether or not we defend vulnerable people should never be one of them. Jennifer Clark and her staff stand at the gate ready to assist, but with little financial resources to do this work. I'd like to ask for your consideration additional funding for the department to meet the needs of the city's HUD consolidated plan, and funding to align with enforcement teams with each of the city council's policing districts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council on this agenda or budget item? Please give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Good morning, council members. My name is Gracia Lenes. I'm with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And I just first would like to say, in this year's budget, we're really happy to see the funding of the new housing inspection program. Substandard housing is something a lot of the residents and a lot of your constituents face with and are putting not only their lives at risk and their health at risk, but also their children's and the elderly's at risk. But not only are they paying not only are they living in these substandard housing, but they're also paying over a third, and this goes across the board, over a third of their salary towards housing. We need to protect Fresno City's residents, your constituents, and make sure that everyone has access to safe and affordable housing, which is why we need to make sure that we have an affordable housing trust fund and roll over that same funding that we had from last year that I believe most of you were able to support and ensure that we have that access to everyone. But not only this, eventually hopefully go into an affordable housing trust fund, which cities like Oakland, Sacramento, Los Angeles have created, again, to protect their constituents and make sure that when warehouses like Amazon and Ulta come, that those salaries are still able to that those people working there are still able to live in a good quality house. Additionally, we would like to see the rollover of the funding for the industrial compatibility assessment, which again is a citywide study that would essentially look parcel level. How the zoning around a certain parcel is compatible to that one. So to ensure that industrial zoning isn't next to a house, isn't next to a park, isn't next to a school or any other sensitive areas. Lastly, we would really like to see an increase in the funding for the Southeast specific plan. Right now there's only, I believe, $185,000 allocated to it, whereas in comparison, I believe the Southwest specific plan had $500,000 to it, and the Fulton Corridor specific plan had $750,000 to it. I'm not sure if that included the DNCP plan as well, but we need to make sure that we have a good quality plan for Southeast Fresno residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the City Council on this item? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Member Baines, I believe you had the floor.
Yeah, prematurely. So thank you for reining me back in. But I was going down the path to just kind of open up some thoughts before I get into my line of questioning, and just really so the public knows what we're doing with the Code Enforcement Division. And there's been a lot said publicly over the last several years. Actually, it's nothing we've been talking about wanting to make code more effective for a long time. And I want to assure not only the public, but also our code staff that we are, in my estimation, and council members Soria and Capriolio certainly can weigh in as they see fit, but in my estimation, this may be one of the most cooperative processes that I've seen the council and the staff engage in ever probably since I've been to City Hall. And I want to thank, of course, the DARM staff and the mayor's office for really, coming to the table in an effective way and listening to the concerns of the council members. And I want staff to know that the idea is to become better. And I want the public to know that the idea is to become better. We think there are opportunities for that. I think this council, and I certainly know the administration, is completely committed to an effective code enforcement. And there are things that I think we need to do up here. There are things that need to happen at the staff level, maybe the director level, that allow our staff to be able to become effective code enforcement agents like I believe they want to be. So I know there's a lot of rumor floating around out there. We do have problems. No one is running away from that. And I think we're moving at a very quick pace, a quicker pace than we probably have ever done on a specific item in this building. But I wanted to reassure folks of that. And Jennifer, I'd love for you to get comments on the record so that people can hear too. But that's my assessment. I think that we're going in the right direction, and I would assume in the next couple of months this body is going to be looking at what I am hoping are some sweeping recommendations that haven't come to council on a specific division since I've been here. So Jennifer, did you want to?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Baines. So we, as staff, really appreciate working with the City Council to identify ways that we can proactively address mutually desirable outcomes, right? So we all want a clean, safe place for our residents, for our businesses, for our community. And so as a group, establishing what those outcomes and those benchmarks are, ensuring that they are reasonable outcomes and that we're all working toward that together, I think is a great opportunity for us to show that we're all on the same page and we're working towards really successful community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to, funny enough, I want to kind of start with the HUD funds, the HUD audit, and kind of big news this year. Something we haven't typically done in the past is literally moving all of code enforcement out of the CDBG allocation line. Can you talk a little bit about where we are with that and why we came to that decision?
Sure. So we have been looking at our monitorings. We work very closely with our local HUD office. We have been working on an audit over the past year to identify how we can best utilize our federal program funds and meet the requirements and the responsibilities of the program. To ensure that we are better serving our community, better serving our neighborhoods, being able to fund our code enforcement and neighborhood revitalization activities out of the general fund enables us to essentially take away some of those strings, some of those reporting requirements that the federal government really expects. It is very hard to engage in the grassroots efforts that we're doing through neighborhood revitalization with some of those strings. So to be able to go out into neighborhoods, we have 15 identified neighborhoods that we're doing proactive community revitalization, neighborhood building, code enforcement. To be able to do that very effectively and quickly requires that we do that with fewer of the federal requirements. And so what this budget does is move that allocation into the general fund and will allow us to disperse those resources in a much more effective manner.
Yeah, and listen, I've always been critical of that practice that we had. As you know, and there was a time, I think before even you were here, Jennifer, that CDBG was funding police officers. And at one time when I was a police officer, I think I was funded through CDBG, in which, listen, we can debate that or not, but I'm glad to hear that we are moving away from that practice, and I think it's a benefit. Pretty much most of my district is a CDBG eligible area, but there are a lot of council members where that's not exactly the case. So the fact that we're moving these code enforcement officers into a general fund capacity, in my estimation, allows them to interact throughout the whole city more effectively, and certainly remove some of the hamstrings that you all have. and plus it's just the right thing to do. This is probably been a long time coming, and I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. And I want to chat a little bit as we hover on code for a minute in that process about the NRT. How are our NRT teams doing? I know we're in 15 neighborhoods now. I know that we have kind of staffed up on that over the last couple of years. We'd love to hear your feedback on our NRT teams and kind of how they're working with our code enforcement specialists.
Absolutely. We're seeing some really great successes with neighborhood revitalization teams. We currently have 2 teams funded. And they include a community outreach specialist as well as community revitalization specialists, so code enforcement officers. But community outreach specialist essentially proactively goes into a neighborhood, identifies people, businesses, agencies like schools that want to participate in the process, that want to be proactive in making change in their neighborhoods and participating in not just code enforcement and blight removal, but in positive improvement and investment in their neighborhoods. So, for example, we have been working in the Hidalgo Leavenworth neighborhood, and the community revitalization specialist and a community outreach specialist and the manager went and met with those school principals, met with school leadership, and talked to those community members. Those community members identified some real challenges, infrastructure challenges in their neighborhood, which made it a less desirable place to live, whether it was sidewalks, street lighting, access to school. And so those neighborhood residents, because of the engagement by our manager and by the neighborhood revitalization team, actually came to CDBG public hearing for needs and said, hey, these are needs in our community. And so those were identified in the process, and so those were in the original draft budget that came out a few months ago as potential places that we could invest our federal resources. So great win.
Right, and I know that when we first brought the NRT concept to introduced it a few years ago, there was probably confusion, at least amongst us up here, as to how they were different than what we normally refer to as a code enforcement specialist, and how they would interact together. I think that what I'm hopeful of, and what I've been getting, the feedback I've been getting at least, is that those two functions are working much better together now than maybe they were a couple years ago. And just from my perspective, I see the NRT component. Code enforcement is an enforcement component. But I'm a fan, as everyone on this dais knows, of community-based policing. And as I think about what this is, it's almost community-based code, right? Where you have both elements, almost the carrot and the stick. And not that NRT is a carrot, but it certainly is a function that that gives it the leeway to interact with the community in a more positive, proactive manner, which is very important in my opinion. So I wholeheartedly endorse our NRT teams, and and again in the work that we're doing with code enforcement, and am hopeful that we can continue to enhance that relationship. I want to switch now to kind of the planning department, the business part of planning, where I hear a lot of our businesses that are still frustrated at the planning desk, right? When they come in, and I know that we have, I think we do, and Bruce may be able to answer this. Do we have a committee working on kind of business interaction, the planning process when somebody wants to come and do something at the desk? Are we working? Do we have a committee for that these days?
So, yes,
okay, we do.
Mayor Brand is bringing back together a group to evaluate what occurred with Business Friendly Fresno,
okay,
and how do we continue to see improvement in not just our processes, but in that interaction with the public.
Has that committee been formed yet?
There are 2 council members that are working with the mayor on that to identify exactly who to include and how frequently to meet and what to look at.
Okay.
But,
so I just heard
yeah.
Councilmember Chavez just whispered in my ear that he's on it along with Councilmember Brandow, from what I heard. That's great. So, and maybe you guys can speak up if I ask a question that Jennifer doesn't know. Are we in the process of putting this together, or do we have is it going to be an extension of Business Friendly Fresno? Kind of, I'm curious to know what it is and what we're expecting, and kind of some timelines on when to get it going.
Absolutely. We're working with the mayor's office. Really, it's an evaluation of what occurred and then a relaunch and maybe potentially a new direction and evaluation of what is actually happening in terms of service levels. So what did we get right? Let's put that aside. Let's really focus on the things that we really want to continue to improve. One of which is a primary focus in our office right now, which is customer service, ensuring that people who come to the counter feel valued, understand that what they are investing in their business, in their home, in the community is really important to us as the city, and how do we help them get there. So that's something we've actually started working on our own, but we'll be working very closely with the committee to ensure that occurs, as well as really providing good information to businesses, to those who want to develop in the community. Again, I keep going back and focusing on what are the rules going to be, so everybody knows going in what those rules are. How much is it going to cost, and how long will it take? Those are so critical in making business decisions for investment, especially when you're talking about a large investment or even a small business. Any investment is a large investment for them. So knowing those rules, knowing that cost and that timeline up front is so critical. So we're going to be working with the committee on those items.
So, and I'm curious that the evaluation that's occurring right now, are we in the process of doing the evaluation of Business Friendly Fresno? Or
we're doing an evaluation of customer service at our front counter. So one of the things that we have heard time and time again is that people feel uncomfortable. It feels like going to the DMV. It feels very oppositional when we come to the front counter. So we have a peer who's evaluating our customer service at the front counter, is providing feedback, is doing one-on-one with staff, is making sure that we're really starting to think about the customer as an ally to invest in our community.
Okay. So I just want to make sure. So is that also the evaluation of BFF, or is that a separate evaluation?
That's part of it. It's not completely. Obviously, we need to look at turnaround times. What are we doing in terms of getting projects through the system? We have some metrics, and those will be evaluated by the committee. Are those the right metrics that we're evaluating right now?
Okay. And I'm curious, Councilmember Chavez or Brandau, what are we hoping? Are we just kind of? Can you give me an overview of what we want to do with this committee?
So basically, we did form this committee, and it's comprised of employees, staff, council that we're going to be bringing forward a couple recommendations. But it really is a comprehensive look at our models, our process, how that gets going through the pipeline, so to speak. And the term we used was BFF 2.0, kind of an expansion of what was done prior. And I know we're going to be looking at different business processes with regards to restaurants and drive-thrus and distribution centers. And I really feel I'm excited about it. I think we're gonna be able to refine our process a little better and make it a little bit more customer friendly. That our DARM director was highlighting.
And do we have any? And what I'm hopeful of is that we plan to bring some of those evaluations to council to share with all of us.
Absolutely. Member Brandau, you want to chime in, or good? Okay. So yeah, this will be really a comprehensive look at a lot of our land use process as well. They'll obviously come to the council and be considered, but I think the value of us being on there was kind of be that liaison, between the council and the mayor's office, respecting the Brown Act. I see the city attorney's ears going over up there, but that'll be done in that work. And I know we're in the process of scheduling the first meeting. The mayor's chief of staff, Tim Ortman, is going to take the lead on facilitating a lot of that coordination.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I'm excited to hear that. I always say that I'm hopeful that we can hear some timelines and expectations soon, whether it comes from a council report or whether it's a formal. Well, first of all, I definitely want to see the evaluation of BFF. I mean, I think that this body deserves that, particularly as you guys launch into BFF 2.0. We need to see how BFF 1.0 performed. and allow the council to at least know that. I want to completely respect the committee process because I know it can be really effective as we're learning if we do it right. But certainly would like to see an update. So I'm saying that for the benefit of my colleagues and for staff, that when that evaluation's done, we'd like to see it. And also I'd like to add that I'm not sure if stakeholders are on the committee.
Yeah, we're going to have folks from the industry, the
Okay.
business community,
Okay.
sit on that and give input.
Okay, fantastic. Well, anyhow, those are my comments. Thank you, Jennifer. I think that you have a big task ahead of you. It's big. The department's big and has a lot of functions, and I know you have your hands full, but you do a great job. Well, no, sorry. No.
Fantastic department.
Yeah.
Great people.
Yeah, they want me to quote our outgoing President Donald Trump, and I'm refusing to take the bait. But anyhow, you guys do a fantastic job. And lastly, I wanted to make sure that I give a shout out to both the asset and stop teams for what they're doing. I know my two friends over here formed asset, and and my other friend on the other end formed stop, and I think that the reports I get from the city attorney's office, probably monthly on that, it sounds like that's an effective tool that we put together. And I just wanted to tell you guys thank you for the insight, both the city manager and my colleagues for that. I was suspicious about what you guys are trying to do, as you know. I think I voted for it reluctantly, but it seems to be having some good effect. So thanks.
Questions already been asked, so no questions.
Thank you. Jennifer, a couple of areas. One, on that HUD stuff, I know I've talked to Kelly about it, and she's a miracle worker, and appreciate all she's done to try to get us back on track with that. You said there were 2 teams that were funded for 15 areas, and of course El Dorado Park is near and dear to my heart since 2008 when I was appointed to this dais. So are the 2 teams, are they still doing maintenance? Are they still spending time in El Dorado Park as well as a couple others? But we were the role model, we were the business model, and I hate to lose momentum, so I'm hoping you can tell me that a lot extra amount of time is still spent in El Dorado Park.
Absolutely. El Dorado is still one of our neighborhoods and is still doing very well. One of the great things, an example that El Dorado has that maybe some of the others are still building toward, is really that community engagement and that property owner engagement in the process and taking ownership of their neighborhood. Right. And that's really what we're trying to build. We're creating self-sustaining neighborhoods that understand who to call if they have a problem, how to get things done when there are challenges that they can't undertake themselves. Absolutely.
The only thing I've ran into or heard about is the turnover. So we help the people in El Dorado neighborhood in particular, and they do very well, and they catch on to what we're trying to do and how to benefit their life and the community, and then they move on. And then we have a new group coming in, so to speak. And so that's the maintenance part that I'm really interested in, because we have to kind of start over. We've got a head start, a jump start on it, but when you have new people, you've got to start from the basics and work up. So.
Absolutely. Like a homeowners association, what we're really trying to do is create that capacity within the neighborhood to train each other, to continue and to pass down that knowledge that is learned. But we are still there to be a support to for that group to reach out to, and for us to proactively have meetings in the neighborhood to allow for that community engagement to continue to occur.
Great. Please do so. It's great. I love it. And I think my people at El Dorado Park have really reacted and proactive in a very, very positive way. They really absorbed this and really wanted to continue and really want to be the role model, the business model for this program. So keep up the good work, and I appreciate it. I had a couple of questions on CDBG program. On B50, there's a little chart and it says housing rehabilitation. It doesn't have a number there. And I looked it up, and last year I think it was $350,000. That's on page B50. Is there a reason for not having a number there, or we haven't calculated yet?
So, as you recall, the federal budget for it's the federal 2017 budget, our 2018 budget. The federal budget has been adopted, but our dollar allocation has not been provided to us as of yet. So we have placeholders at this point. We've had a draft annual action plan. We've had public engagement on that. We anticipate releasing our red line of the annual action plan, which includes CDBG, Home, ESG, and HOPWA, all of the formula programs. And we anticipate monies for housing rehabilitation, paint, those kinds of things, but we don't have an exact number. Ms. Furtado is... Oh, it's the header for that category. Thank you. For that particular, housing rehabilitation is the header for that particular category. But that being said, these are still, again, we anticipate as soon as we get that allocation number, we'll have a 2-week, we'll publish for 2 weeks the annual action plan in its red line version from the original that we published earlier this year. And we'll be coming back to City Council for a full discussion regarding all of those formula programs.
Fantastic. And then at the bottom it says planning administration. The administration portion is 1.1 million, and last year I think it was around 637,000. So I'm kind of curious as to why that number doubled.
So the planning and administration portion of the budget is typically about 20% of the overall allocation. That is the cap that's allowed. Last year we had still a significant amount of those dollars that were allocated to planning activities, including $750,000 Southwest Pacific Plan, $550,000 in the Southeast Pacific Plan. So those take away from that cap. So the activity of monitoring, of administering the programs is substantial. But again, once we have our allocation, we'll know better. And so these numbers, again, are really placeholders and will be analyzed as we go through that annual action plan process once we get the specific budget.
The last question is, it says nonprofit facilities, 525,000. What does that entail?
We, when we released the potential notice of funding availability, there were a number of agencies that submitted applications for funding for nonprofit facilities, including rehabs of existing facilities, improvements of facilities, and again, we would anticipate bringing those back. So those would be actually administered by those agencies. So we would be subgranting those out into the community for improvements on existing facilities.
Thank you very much. And then I join in my colleague, Member Bain's comments about at the outset of his time at the microphone. And we are working well together and look forward to continuing to do that. I think we're on the right track, and we've got a bright future for us. And I wanted to thank you and the team behind you. You guys all work really, really hard for the city, and we really appreciate it. And my hat's off to each and every one of you. So thank you.
Yeah, question, Jennifer. On the salaries under CDBG, the 1.3 million proposed, those are for what positions specifically is all of that for under CDGB?
So in the entitlement section, which is A19, it talks about the specifics of the various programs. We have 8 to 10 positions within the department that focus solely on administration of our programs. We have 4 formula programs: Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnerships Act, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing for Persons with AIDS, HIV. Those 4 formula programs have significant federal requirements as it relates to monitoring, as it relates to compliance. And so really the focus of our administration is to ensure that we are complying with those federal regulations. So we go out and monitor, we keep records within the office, we ensure that we're doing our federal environmental checklist, those kinds of things. That's what's entailed in those dollars. And again, the specifics of that will be more detailed when the annual action plan is brought forward later this month.
Okay. And then on the salaries, permanent salaries under the general fund, From 2016, it's 7.6 million to the proposed 2018 is 12 million. 5 million, just under 5 million increase in salaries.
Right. As the budget manager outlined, we'll be moving our neighborhood revitalization teams into the general fund. We have also added the rental housing division, which includes the positions that were identified in February for our reactive and our asset teams. So those plus the additional positions specifically for our proactive rental housing inspection program. So those are all the positions included.
Okay, and then finally, under professional services and consulting, you have $3 million proposed in consulting fees, outside consulting fees for 2018. In 2016, it was 3.1. Those are for what specific? What kind of consulting contracts that total $3 million?
Predominantly, our consulting contracts entail for our PG&E contract with to do home energy tune-up assessments as well as business energy tune-up assessments. We actually hire an outside consultant who goes and does those inspections for us. I have the manager of that program here, and he can talk more about the success that we've had. But when we outsourced that particular work, our valuation, our efficiency of utilizing those program dollars nearly doubled. We also have agreements with the Economic Development Corporation to assist us with business relocation related to high-speed rail. We also have our stationary master plan that we're conducting, and then we have the continuation of our specific plans that will continue into the next fiscal year. So we have the finishing, the completion, Southwest Pacific Plan, the starting of the Southeast Pacific Plan. So those will continue with one-time consulting agreements.
And how much of those plan outside consultants, what would you estimate that would be, and then decrease once that's completed?
So I would estimate once we have concluded our agreement with high-speed rail and our various specific plans, that would drop to just our agreement that we have currently for our PG&E consultant, who is, it depends on an annual basis as to how many they conduct, but it's anywhere from $1 to $3 million on an annual basis.
For the plans?
No,
you're talking about the PG&E.
Right, what would be left? I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're saying there would be $1 to $3 million left after the plans?
Right.
Okay, when you got $3 million already.
So there are several areas where they're identified. So one is in general fund, then there are the federal dollars, then there's the high-speed rail and the PG&E contract. So there are a number of places that we identify for consultants. It just really depends on an annual basis. Jose, how much would you say? 2.3 annually.
Okay. Is there any amount of those consultant contracts that can be done through your city staff?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you'll see in our long-range planning division, one of the things that we're increasing is dollars that we're expending on outreach. We have learned a lot through the Parks Master Plan process on how do we engage the community, how do we reach out, how do we provide information to the community. So we're increasing the budget that's in there so that we can do more outreach within our internal staff without sending that out. We've also are in the process of hiring additional staff for engineering work for our plan review to ensure that we can stay on top of our normal flow of permit request, plan review for new buildings coming in, so that we can do more of that in-house. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do. We've heard loud and clear we'd like to see more of these activities occur within our city department, and so we're working hard to incorporate that into our process going forward.
So would you estimate that you might be able to save $500,000 to $750,000 with city staff in the future? Is that a fair estimate?
I would say that's a fair estimate.
Okay, and we should see that savings after these plans are done. And you also said some of the permitting and other issues that you do in your department,
Right.
that you've been using outside consultants, because we get them obviously not every week, but seen them fairly consistently.
Right.
Okay, I just want to understand that. And then just briefly, the PG&E contract, that's $2.3 million. Exactly what is happening with that contract?
I really would like an opportunity for Mr. Gonzalez to
Sure.
really talk about the exciting things that they're doing.
Sure.
Good morning, council members.
Morning.
Jose Gonzalez, Sustainability Division. As far as the PG&E contract, there's a local government partnership contract between the City of Fresno and Pacific Gas and Electric. And initially when this contract began back in mid-2012, the contract was only approximately $600,000. Once PG&E saw the opportunities and the benefits and the success that the City of Fresno had achieved in doing these energy assessments, they decided to increase our funding, but also increase our range of where we actually perform these energy assessments. Today, the program is regional. We provide energy assessments for residential from Kern County, Bakersfield, to San Joaquin County, Stockton. The City of Fresno is looked at as a leader in the entire San Joaquin Valley when it comes to energy efficiency and the good stewardness of energy efficiency. We also provide energy efficiency assessments for businesses. In the Fresno County, to date, we've done over 300 businesses, assisting them in understanding energy efficiency opportunities and helping them, guiding them, assisting them with incentives and rebates. So it is a very large program.
Okay. And are you talking about that's what PG&E is doing, and they're doing these assessments and these energy assessments in terms of how people can save on their energy?
Right. They contract with the City of Fresno, who contracts with a consultant who does the energy assessment.
Okay. So we're paying somebody $2.3 million to go out to the City of Fresno and what, businesses, homeowners? I mean, how are people selected? How does that work?
Both. So it's free of charge. We have advertising on a regular basis. You may see the flyers at various events. You may see people at Home Depot or Lowe's who are talking about energy tune-up. It comes out on community access television. Sometimes it's in our utility bill, but it's really allowing you to call in. It's free of charge, and it is voluntary for individuals who want to participate.
And PG&E do we have an agreement with PG&E? Are they paying us for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Essentially, PG&E is paying us to manage their program.
Okay. And what are they paying?
The cost of the program. So if you'll, let me see if I can find the right page. B50? Yes. So our agreement is $2.8 million from Pacific Gas and Electric Service. So PG&E pays us $2.8 million, and that provides for our staffing internally as well as to contract out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I forgot to make a motion. I wanted to really quickly make a motion to roll over the ICS funding from last year to this year. Did I say that right, City Attorney? Or is that, I'm trying to roll over
what now?
The industrial compatibility study funding from last year to this year?
Rebudget it for next year?
Yes, okay. I want to rebudget that money from last year to this year's budget. Thank you.
That will go into the hopper for when we vote on budget motions. Member Soria?
Thank you, Council President. Have a number of questions. I'll start off with the questions, or kind of following up on the questions that Gary was asking regarding the contract with PG&E. First, I do want to thank Jose, who has been working with our office. I know that you guys actually mentioned it in the budget. My district has this program we launched. It's called Power the Tower, where we're trying to help small businesses reduce their energy costs. So thank you for working with us, Jose, as we have some ambitious endeavors for the tower area. But I know that that's part of it. And so I noticed that you guys are going to be hiring another, I guess, kind of part-time staff. How will that help? What do you guys expect out of that? Is there more work to be done and so forth?
Currently, given our service area, there are only 2 staff members. So the manager, Jose, and a staff assistant. We need an engineering tech who has the capacity to go over those reports with homeowners and with businesses when they call in and say, hey, I received this report, it's really great, what does it mean? And so we have someone who can actually go through those with them. Right now, it really is very time consuming for our manager to take on that activity each and every day, in addition to his regular oversight of this program, as well as Power the Tower or EPIC grant. There are a number of other opportunities that we're working on.
Perfect. And then with the 2.3, I guess that's what's allocated for the service?
For the consultant, correct.
To do the energy audits. And this is 2.3 is expended every year just for audits. And do we go through the entire 2.3? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So those are my questions with that. I'm going to move on to, I guess, HUD, CDBG, and all that good stuff. I know that I've asked this question. I think I asked this question back in April to Kelly. So what's the status on the HUD, ESG, home, and CDBG audits today?
We have a number of monitorings that we have on a regular basis. So all of the federal programs require that our regional office monitor our activities. And then we get reports. We work on those reports on what we can do to correct any errors that they found, monitoring findings. We continue to work on those. We've had a number that have been closed this year because we've concluded those particular monitoring findings. But if you want more specific detail, I can let Ms. Furtado talk about that specifically.
That'd be great. I know that we've asked her in the past, and as you mentioned, there's some that have been closed, and I believe that's the ESG and also the home funds, correct?
Kelly Furtado. Yes, and a little clarification on the home. We are simply awaiting HUD to read our responses to them and respond to us to officially close it. So we'll get. We're anticipating a closing of that one as well. ESG was closed recently.
Okay, ESG. Okay, and so for those, there are no repayment.
On the ESG one, there was a $4,000 repayment.
Oh, there was
yes, it was handled, and we actually were able to repay ourselves that dollar amount. It was from, I believe, 2011. We figured that one out, and it was repaid to our kind of our account where they hold our money and then reimburse us from, and then we basically drew those funds back down for eligible activities. So it was a wash in essence.
And home, we still don't know.
Home, there was no findings that had anything to do with repayment. There was some technical stuff. I would consider it more like technical assistance. We have responded to everything and provided all of that information to HUD. We're just simply awaiting their final comments and closure.
And then now specifically for CDBG, which has been the one that has
That's the one. Correct. So that's the one we've been working. City manager and our division has been working ongoing with our regional office on some of the open monitorings. And then more recently, we've had an auditing where we had 2 of the auditors living in-house for a few months. And we do not have any final conclusion on that one. We're awaiting a scheduling of an exit interview with the regional office and the other office.
Have they given us at all a timeline? I know last year we thought that we would have finalized it in 2016.
So that is yes, correct. So that is the ongoing monitorings that we've been working with the city manager and our regional office on for as long as I've been involved with this department. And we were anticipating closure. Bruce had gained commitment from the regional office that we would have closure by the end of 2016. Unfortunately, their director retired, and we have continued that process, and we are still aiming at closure of those and resolution of those issues, but we are still months away, I would anticipate. And on the other, we just concluded it's kind of the same information being audited over and over again in some essence. And the other that is also ongoing and current, they just completed their field work at the end of April. So we anticipate in the next probably 30 days a scheduling of an exit conference and understanding what their findings were.
How do you guys feel in terms of repayment? Do you guys feel confident that we may not have to? Where are you guys at in terms of, going through the process with
I don't have a confidence level that I could share with you on that.
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I'm not confident one way or the other at this point. Maybe the director would or the city manager would like to chime in, but I'm not very optimistic.
Okay. So that may mean that we may have to do some repayment.
It's possible.
Yeah, and I know last year we had allocated a $500,000. Has that been rolled over to this budget?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then last year I had made a motion that if this unused monies of CDBG, which would be this portion of the repayment along with part of whatever the EDA grant didn't get utilized to use for affordable housing, if you recall that. From last year's motion. I don't know if anyone recalls that, but that was supported by this council, or I know there's been a couple of changes on the council, but previously supported in the budget. So I wanted to see if we just can continue and do the same motion as we did last year, so that whatever dollars aren't expended, similarly to what we said last year and was supported by the majority of folks here, we could use it towards affordable housing. I know that we've been in discussions with the administration about some potential opportunities in some affordable housing development. So that would be my motion to do that. And then I have a couple other questions regarding the CDBG. I don't know if it would be Kelly or you, but just wanted to get a sense. So all the allocations that you guys did, like for lead paint, senior paint, minor code compliance, is the kind of the allocation of funds driven by, is there like a strategy, or did we receive comments as to where to put how to allocate these dollars?
Absolutely. So, Council Member, the Housing and Community Development Commission, HCDC, holds a needs hearing each year to understand what the current priorities are of the community. This feeds into our overall annual action planning process as well as our consolidated planning process. The consolidated plan is a 5-year plan. We're about to enter year 3. And so this plan has priorities, specific priorities of the kinds of activities that we will undertake. And then with the input from the community, we identify specific projects that under those categories that we would identify to undertake. And so these particular projects were identified through that needs hearing process as well as the consolidated planning process, and things that we've heard from the City Council provide to us. You provided some input in April when we held our last public hearing as to the kinds of activities that you'd like to see funded, and that's how this budget is built.
And just question on the senior paint program, you have two, I guess, line items. One is just for $100,000, and then the second one is for $199,000, but it has an asterisk with nonprofit. What is that?
We received a response to our notice of funding availability from Habitat, who asked if they could undertake an additional paint program. And so potentially that is an activity that we would undertake with the annual action plan along with our traditional internally administered program of senior paint. It's oversubscribed. We typically run out of money well early in the year. I've heard from many council members we need to have more dollars available. But this also starts to build capacity in our community to do additional rehabilitation that we wouldn't otherwise do.
So, and that's great. So how will Habitat for Humanity decide what homes or what to do, their process?
One item that I'd like to just mention is that the complementary programs were designed because of Habitat's application, where they acknowledge they will only be able to have the capacity to take on up to 6 projects that will handle lead abatement. And as many of us know, a lot of our seniors are living in an older housing stock throughout our community, and anything prior to 1978 requires that. So I just wanted to add on that that's another reason we're offering this complimentary in-house one, because our staff is fully capable of handling the lead abatement portion of that as well.
So that's the 100,000?
The 100,000, correct.
And that would do 6 houses?
No, the 6 houses were included in the 199,000
Okay.
for the potential subrecipient through Habitat.
Okay.
That was the max that they thought that they would be able to do. So there's going to be some ramp up time with a new nonprofit taking on this type of work, and so we wanted to have an ongoing project still happening in-house. So I just wanted to elaborate on that. And then the questions about the eligibility process and how do you pick the programs, that has not been determined. Again, we have to go through the whole annual action planning process, and that will be something that we will do. We will define a program on the back end once we know that the funding has been awarded to them.
Okay.
And clearly we're
So-
open to input, but we've got some great ideas on how we can, again, run complementary programs.
So this is your suggestions that you're going to bring back in the action plan, what's here in the budget. Generally, don't we have the action plan done before the budget? So you're kind of telling me to make a decision today to some degree in terms of what's going to be in the action plan?
Yes, unfortunately, with the allocations not being announced, that's the situation we're in. Last year, our action plan was submitted to HUD in May 15th on our deadline, and this is just extenuating circumstances this year. And we anticipate by the time that we come back with the substantial amendment to the council for consideration, it will include any adjustments if it is at a time in which the budget has already been voted on and passed. And
When
I'll
do we
defer back.
anticipate having the action plan coming to us?
It must be submitted to HUD no later than August 16th of 2017.
Yeah,
so
so
that
I
is
would-
a very hard deadline.
We
it could be
share
tomorrow.
your frustration, council member.
Could be
It has
tomorrow.
been last year was the first time that we actually delivered the actual action plan in advance of the budget because of the point you just raised, and that was the path we were on. We were on schedule. We were going to deliver. Unfortunately, things happened in Washington that all of a sudden has.
That some of us don't like. But
Nevertheless, it's frustrating, and the goalpost keeps getting moved on us.
Okay. Well, and so, just kind of guess for the record, I'm going to reserve, if we vote on this budget and this budget is approved, I'm going to reserve my right to be able to change my mind on the allocations, because what you guys are asking us today, you guys kind of already have them set out without us having a full-blown discussion of the action plan. And so, just for the record, I'm making my comments. So if I do support this budget, that doesn't mean that I'm supporting every single line item, that I will reserve my right to change when the action plan comes before us.
And depending on what happens in Washington, we may be rewriting this action plan, or there may be some subsequent reductions or changes in the programs that may not affect FY18, but could substantially or significantly impact what we do in FY19.
Thank you. Couple other questions that I have. On the neighborhood street improvements, I know that we have 1.9. Do we have a strategy about how we're going to expend these dollars? I know every year my reiteration is I'm hoping that rather than us just divvying up, because that's what we do, and I know we've done it in the past in terms of the needs, I hope that we're really looking at using it as augmenting rather than supplanting a distribution of these funds for street improvements. That's why we receive CDBG dollars, because we have poor neighborhoods. And so I just hope that as you guys are thinking about your strategy, and maybe you can talk about your strategy, that these funds are truly used to augment rather than supplant an equal distribution.
Absolutely. So, council member, I appreciate that. Again, you are correct. The annual action plan, when it is adopted, will amend this budget in some way, because we know it won't be down to the penny exactly the same. So even if the categories and the allocations are the same, the dollars themselves will not be exact. So it will amend this budget when it's adopted. The annual action plan red line will identify specific streets to be improved. Those include ADA improvements, sidewalks, street lighting, and neighborhood streets within
CDBG
targeted neighborhoods, specifically ones that have been identified through public hearings, whether it was here at the City Council or if it was at HCDC needs hearing. Those specific locations have been identified through that process.
Are we also considering, I know we've done this, this council approved the active transportation plan. I'm just wondering how this budget begins to tackle that. Do we have a strategy as to addressing, some of the needs and desires that we all voted on, and how we're going to be doing that with this existing budget? Is the CDBG dollars, are we looking at, tackling some of those issues that were addressed? I'd like to see how, we're actually implementing plans that, we continuously pass here, so that we're reaching some benchmarks and not just, for the sake of today just voting on, or, when we vote on the budget, voting on just to vote on projects, but actually having a strategy because we've set out these great plans.
Absolutely. So I would say that anything that we do at a neighborhood street level must be ADA accessible. So we need to include not just the rebuilding of the streets, but curb, gutter, and sidewalks, and ADA compatible crossing. However, CDBG can't be used on regional type amenities. So where it is a trail or a ATP type project that is a broader in nature, that's not specific to a neighborhood, it is not an eligible activity. So it's kind of a yes and no answer. Yes, we're increasing and improving pedestrian access through our investments, but no, it is not specifically funding regional trail kind of activity.
But it could do, as you mentioned, sidewalks, and we know there's many of these neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks.
So council member, we can take this up probably more appropriately. We take it up tomorrow with Public Works.
Okay.
But it is in context of a bigger conversation. As we discussed, there's additional gas tax that is coming into the city this year and potentially more in FY18. But it's either putting in sidewalks where there are no sidewalks, or replacing sidewalks that are in poor condition, or the lack of curb cuts. And then those same dollars could be used to repave streets. I've heard council members who want to have streets repaved, they want sidewalks replaced, or they want sidewalks put in neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. It all, in a lot of ways, comes from the same sources. So those are the choices that we're going to have to make. In discussions with the Public Works Director, he has a very, very long list of sidewalks that need to be replaced because they're damaged as a result of trees or age or whatever it is. But there's also a list of neighborhoods that have no sidewalks, and as we discussed, there's more to just adding a sidewalk and curb and gutter. You also have to have the flood control or some place for that water to go to, and some of these neighborhoods, there is nothing there for those gutters to feed into. So it's just not a matter of putting in a sidewalk. But my point is whether it's CDBG, it's gas tax, it's some other form of transportation dollars, such as Measure C, a lot of it is all competing priorities, and we're going to have to make a decision on which ones we want to fund. We are going to come back with a 5-year program. It will include some sidewalks, which are ATP eligible. There's some ATP grants that we're going to be pursuing, but there's a lot of need and not a lot of resources.
And you bring up a great point, Bruce, in terms of even like flood control. Are we in conversations with flood control, because they also have a budget where we can leverage funds to help?
We're in discussions with flood control, but unless a project is in their list of things to do, they're very quick to point out, well, if you want another basin, then you can help pay the cost of that investment.
I see. Okay. Before I move out of the whole housing CDBG stuff, I wanted to ask, I forgot, have we been required to return any funds to the state for lack of projects or project performance? I thought I heard a rumor not that long ago that we had to return about a little bit over $1 million on home funds. Could you?
So There was Cal Home is the only one where we were working with one last home buyer and unable to close the project prior to when the state program expired. So Kelly can address that, but specifically, it's certainly not in that level of dollar amount.
Okay.
Councilmember, the only thing that I can think of, so Cal Home, whenever I moved up to the third floor almost a year ago now, there were 2 open grant awards that the city had received. Both of them were for $1.5 million. However, Cal Home came with a lot of restrictions. It was a first-time homeowner program, and while we were able to have the staff really ratchet up the application process and work with lenders, they expended one of the grants and the other expired before we were even able to fully expend the first and jump into the second. So while it wasn't returned, it was basically a defunded grant. And so if that's
So
what
we
you're speaking of.
I don't know. I just heard that we had to return maybe a little bit over $1 million in some home dollars, or
It was not home.
so it was. It's Cal
It's
Home.
called Cal Home, so
and
it's a
that's
state.
mostly for ownership.
It was a first-time
First-time
home
home buyer.
ownership program, I think up to $50,000. And it was a very challenging program to get people to qualify. And I believe that the challenge was that it extended so long, the process that it took to get into the home, that many things fell through. So although our team was really able to produce a lot and fulfill the first grant, we had back-to-back grants, and there was just no way to fulfill the other prior to it expiring.
And do we still have some of those funds, or
They've both expired, and their funding stream, they do not have any indication that they're going to be redoing that program. It was a very successful program towards the end of it, and so if it does come up, it's something we could certainly look to applying for again. But right now, there is no news on the horizon that they're going to be issuing those grants again anytime soon.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have a question. There is, I think on page B51, there's an item that says you guys are, I think it's $59,700 for lease payment on vehicles. And I know I had a conversation on 11 vehicles for the proactive rental housing program. I know I talked to Bruce yesterday in terms of when we're looking at fee. Is this new fleet or is existing fleet?
New.
Okay. And what kind of fleet are we getting?
We're getting small pickup trucks that would allow us to put a ladder in the back so that we can access units when we're trying to do inspections.
Okay, so it wouldn't allow us to look at more fuel efficient.
I'd have to defer
hybrid.
to fleet on what's
Okay.
available in that category.
Okay. Now, I'd just like to see if there's opportunities, as I had mentioned to Bruce, when we do get fleet that where it's appropriate. I know, like for the police and when we do trucks and so forth, it's not. But I think when it is appropriate for some of our city vehicles where we can save the fuel money, I think we should be looking at those opportunities.
We'll look at the opportunities. Being an old fleet guy, I look at more than just the fuel, though. So it's the life cycle cost, it's the total cost of operation. So in some cases, the fuel savings may be attractive, but the overall cost of ownership may not be as lucrative as maybe other options. And I will tell you, in this day and age, other than the difference between electric, there are vehicles that are now certified as partial zero emission that run on gasoline that are very, very clean vehicles compared to what we were operating 10 years ago. But we'll certainly look at those,
Yeah,
those
or
alternatives.
like as you said, if there are those vehicles that are
Hybrids, things like that.
zero clean,
Yes.
whatever. Just wanting to make that point. Thank you. Couple other questions I have in terms of the line item stuff. I see that there is an increase again on the consulting outside and then also public relations. Is there a breakdown of that, what you guys are intending to do?
Right. So if you carry back over into our budget section and we look in particular at our long-range planning, neighborhood Planning Division. So in advanced planning, we're looking at significant investment in public relations and specialized services, including postage and outreach. So the main focus of that, as I said earlier, really is to start doing more engagement within our staff rather than outsourcing those activities, so that our team is on the ground at the public meetings, is actually doing the engagement, sending out the notices, meeting with individuals, so that we're doing more of that outreach internally.
Okay. And then there's another one on contract extra help. I think the previous year there was 4,200. Now we have 50. Is there something?
Right. So we use that for a number of items. Contract extra help can be for interns over the summer. We have a number of interns that we're hiring as service aides over the summer to work at the front counter to do some of these specialized research for us internally. It provides them opportunities for growth, but it also allows us to access additional resources that we wouldn't otherwise have. So that's a pretty large component of contract extra help. Plus, as we have individuals retire, before we can fill that position, sometimes we have to fill in with extra help during that period of time when someone leaves before we can hire a position.
And so you guys have that out of general fund, and then I see that you guys have out of CDBG 190,000 for extra help.
Right.
What is that for? Can you explain?
You may have just seen me turn to Roxanne, who's our masterful budget person, because I'm going to need her help on this one. But I don't know the line items. I don't know them by heart. But I know that one of the things that we included this year was our environmental assessments. So we did not have budgeted money for that in the past. And so I know that we use it a lot. Every project we do has got to be environmentally assessed before we can spend a dollar on it. And because we have so much more money going out to subrecipients and nonprofits and community-based organizations this year than we've ever had in the past, we have included an increased budget for environmental assessments. Some of them we outsource, some of them we do through our own internal partners through the other divisions. But if I can, I'd like to let Roxanne kind of go over what maybe some of the other items are in the
Yeah, some of the
budget.
other things too that it's used for, if I may, for additional clarification. It's also for programs that are done within CDBG in other departments, and a classic example would be after-school programs. So some of that funding that previously was in the temp, you can see the temp line items, is now down in contract extra help. That's where they wanted it for this year, and that's funded out of CDBG, so that's in DARM, but it's run by Parks. And that's true of several other things. That was also true for.
So that's not included within the 593,000 that it's already lined item for Parks after school program?
Yes, that is part of it.
So then what is the 190,000?
Well, that's a part of the total program for after school. That total that you see there, that 593, is made up of a multitude of line items, and that's one of them.
Okay. Okay. And within, you know how you said the environmental assessments, is that also included within the professional consulting outside, the 622,000? Or is that what?
So a combination of contract extra help is, as the budget manager explained previously, and then professional services, consulting. For CDBG, we again hire professional services for specific, that would be the environmental consulting. That's a portion of it, but we can get a breakdown of those specifics for you.
Okay, perfect. And then in the following page of the line items, there's a 1.3 million roughly under improvements. Can you speak to that? What is that for? Because previously we didn't have allocated any funds in that line item.
Right. So, based
page 46.
Right. So we have a combination of project grants as well as improvements. So those are all combined would include the street improvements, the physical building improvements if we were funding subrecipients. So all of those projects combined. So you have contract construction, you have improvements, you have project grants. So included in those together cumulatively would gain you those outside contracts.
And also, if you will look, there's also about $1.3 million in the FY17 amended under rock and mineral. That's for the neighborhood improvement projects. That money is now down in the improvements category. That money will probably be moved back up to rock and min as streets uses it, but it's put in here just to track it and just to identify it. Until they actually identify the areas that they're going to go to, the areas that you guys will be designating for streets to go out and do, and they'll probably be moving most of that money, I would suspect, back up into rock and mineral because that's where they spend it out of.
And is this line item includes for both park improvements and neighborhood street improvements?
Yes, it does, because again, those amounts that you see in that table on page B50 are made up of a multitude of items and a multitude of line items, one of which is rock and min, another one is improvements, another one is contract construction, another one is salaries for the individuals that actually go out and do those improvements. So it's made up of a combination of line items.
And another one that popped up to me was on page 47, project grants for CDBG, $994,000. Do we know?
So again, once the budget is brought back, we will have more specifics under that. But under it doesn't line up specifically to what we anticipate being outsourced to subrecipients, but project grants would include those items that we're funding to nonprofit agencies.
Right, that would include the nonprofit facilities of 525 and the nonprofit public services of 229. And so those are identified under project grants because that's money that's going to be sent out of the
Can you
city.
say that again? Sorry, I missed it.
Oh, sure.
What was the breakdown?
On page B50, you have two not-profit. Those are going to be external. At least currently, those are going to be external grants, and that's nonprofit facilities, which is $525,000, and nonprofit public services, which is $229,600. And so that's going to be the bulk of those project grants that will be granted to outside agencies for whatever work that they do in the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I have two more questions. One on the page 49 under the planning and development grant programs. Did we just kind of carry over those consulting dollars that we had, the 2.5? I know we've asked for the same, or have we expended them, and is it just various consulting contracts or planning?
On B49.
No.
No.
Line item detail.
Line item, sorry.
49.
Yes, so that is a continuation of the services that we provide through our high-speed rail program. So we assist businesses, we contract with the EDC to help those who need assistance, business relocation, entitlement processing, that kind of thing. And then we carry over whatever is not used from year to year.
I noticed too under the line items of the home programs, the loan and the grants, there was kind of a shift in the dollar amount. So for the loans, we have $2.6 million. and then the project grants under home for $1 million.
Right. So as you recall,
did we receive an increase or?
So when we have, yes, we did receive additional funds last year, allocation from our home program. We anticipate going forward continuing that because it's a formula allocation. But this anticipated budget, each year we're alternating between our rehab program, our homeowner rehab program, and going out to an agency, a nonprofit or a for-profit agency to either develop or rehabilitate affordable housing for rental. So this identifies those particular project areas, and we'll be able to get into specifics with the annual action plan.
Okay. And on that project grant, the $1 million, what could that be utilized for?
Those were homeowner rehabilitation. So we were rehabbing homes. I think our limit was $65,000 per house on rehab. So that gets us around 18 houses.
And then lastly, just on the parking garage improvements. So did we add additional money for the parking garage 7 improvements? I was just wondering, why is it in this?
So we're carrying it over from prior year allocation so that we can complete our project. So we have specific projects that were identified in the report. And we started that process of engineering, of going out to bid, and we'll be continuing those projects into the future. So it's a total of 1.6, about 434,000 is a carryover from our current fiscal year of projects. And so we'll be continuing those activities.
Where was that included last year? Because as it's stated here in the line item, there was no allocation previously. Was it somewhere else?
Yeah, previously it was in Public Works.
Oh, okay. Why did we change it to DARM?
Well, because that's where parking is managed out of.
Okay, so we had first allocated in Public Works.
Public Works, right, and now it's in DARM.
Why did we do that initially?
Initially, I guess we did it in Public Works because, number one, parking used to be managed out of Public Works, and number two, I believe Facilities is taking the lead in doing some of those repairs and managing that project for repairs. But we put it in DARM this next year so that they can manage the project and they can see the money as it's being spent and oversee the project.
I see. Okay. And did you mention at the beginning that there was a decrease in kind of the funds that DARM received this year, the appropriation? I don't know. Was there a decrease, or are we expecting about the same as last year?
Well, while Jane's looking for it, it's actually going to be, well, it depends on the color of money. If you look at, for example, general fund, they saw an increase because we took the code enforcement, what was left of code enforcement that was being funded out of CDBG, made a conscious decision based on ongoing discussions with HUD to now fund that out of the general fund. So it is, in a lot of respects, a higher allocation, not a decrease in funding.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Good job. All right, the screen is clear. So you are dismissed, Ms. Clark.
Thank you.
Excused. All right, folks, and now the most exciting budget item that we handle every year, general city purpose. This stuff is fantastic. No, hang on to your seats, Council. This is always a good one. Go ahead.
That puts the pressure on.
All right, rocket.
All right, General City Purpose Department starts on page B77. This is a general fund and special revenue fund and also debt service. This is where most of the debt service, in fact, for the city as a whole, for the general fund at least, is housed. This department contains items that are of a citywide nature and are not department specific. One of the things that is in there this year is the SPCA budget. That budget has been increased by $152,000 via their request for a budget increase. This is primarily due to an increase in minimum wages and the increasing cost of services. Also contained within this budget is a historic preservation mitigation program for $50,000 that is necessary in order to offset the additional cost of any historically appropriate repairs citywide for historical items and historical buildings. The Granite Park contract that was approved by council is also contained within here. The Central Valley Community Sports Foundation, that is at $150,000. There is $100,000 for the Kaiser Park project that's also in here. There is $40,000, I believe, for the Fresgo app outreach to increase usage of that particular program. And just for a note, the Public Safety Fleet Division charges are also located within this division or department, and their total cost is $700,000. As far as staffing is concerned, the only staff that's contained within this department is staff for the retirement office. There have been no changes requested in that staffing for next year, and so the only thing that has changed is a full year funding for a position that they added last year. That concludes my presentation. I'm open to any questions that the council may have.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and go out to the public. At this time, we have 3 yellow cards from folks who want to address this agenda item. Do we have Ilda Villa here? Please come forward. Give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes. Buenos días, necesitamos tu nombre y también tu dirección y vas a tener 3 minutos.
¿Vas a traducir por ella?
3 minutos. Oh, sí, 6. Necesitas, podemos hacer 6 si necesitas interpreter.
Mi nombre es Hilda.
Okay, so 6 minutes.
¿Ya?
Will you interpret?
Yes.
Okay.
Mi nombre es Hilda Villa.
I could.
Y mi dirección es 4331
Can
East.
you move the microphone down? Gracias.
Mi nombre es Hilda Villa y mi dirección es 4331 East Hamilton, apartamento 116. Aquí estoy para, como trabajo de voluntaria ahí en la escuela, de pasando los niños. Miro muchos perros en la escuela y cuando los niños salen a caminar, cuando salen de la escuela de Van Pau, y los niños les tienen mucho miedo y pues eso no está bien que haya perros ahí en la escuela para los niños, el bienestar de los niños.
So this is la señora Hilda Villa, and she wanted to make a comment in relation to the SPCA issue. And so what she shared is that she's a volunteer crossing guard at Vang Pao Elementary in District 5, and she just wants to share that that there's a lot of loose dogs when kids are walking to and from school near Vang Pao, and that it's not right for the well-being of children to be exposed to the loose dogs in the area, and that kids are scared of these animals, these loose dogs around the school sites. So she just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias.
Okay, our next speaker is going to be Esther Postiglione. Please come forward. Give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Esther Postiglione. My address is 111 East Terrace Avenue, Fresno 93704. I'm here on behalf of Cultiva la Salud. I also am a representative on BPAC for District 5, and I also wanted to just make some comments in relation to the SPCA. And I just want to recommend that the council consider the issue that's happening not just in District 5, but in District 1, throughout the entire city, with loose dog issues and the fact that it really does need to be addressed. It's something that definitely affects the health of our residents throughout the city, their ability to walk and bike safely in their neighborhoods. As being a part of Cultiva la Salud, we lead a lot of community engagement activities, including walking groups at Hidalgo Elementary, at Winchell Elementary. We also lead cumbia rides throughout Southeast Fresno, where we ride bikes as a group and play music. And one of the biggest issues we see are loose dogs. There's streets we have to avoid because the dogs run out, and it causes a hazard for people walking and biking. As we're walking with residents near Hidalgo and Winchell, we also see dogs following us and following the parents. And they've shared that this isn't an isolated incident. This happens throughout the city where residents feel unsafe walking or biking in their communities because of this issue. And so we definitely recommend that the City Council consider the SPCA's needs and definitely work to address this. I know that this is something that has been called out in the active transportation plan as an issue, but there is no plan to address it. We've had some preliminary conversations with the SPCA, and they've mentioned that this increase in the budget would allow them to have some staff that would help address these issues. And so we just recommend that the city consider these to address the loose dog issue throughout the city, because it is rampant in every district in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Genoveva Islas. Please come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and you'll also have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. My name is Genoveva Islas, and I'm the director of Cultiva la Salud. I live at 2928 East Princeton Avenue in District 7. Our interest is, as Cultiva la Salud, is to promote health and prevent disease. We believe that every Fresnan deserves to live the full course of their life in optimal health, and that the reality is that some neighborhoods have disadvantages in terms of health promoting assets. When you think about access to healthy food, opportunities to be physically active, there are clear variances. And as has been presented today, both by Hilda and by Esther, one of the real issues that community residents are confronting are these loose dogs. These loose dogs are a challenge for children who are trying to walk to school. They're a challenge for residents who are waiting at bus stops in order to get on public transportation. And they're a challenge overall for people who are using alternative forms of transportation to get to work or to get to school, right? So when we think about this threat and funding for it, we do believe that it is appropriate to begin to look at reinvesting in animal control services that have been depleted for a number of years. In talking to the Central California SPCA, allowing them more funding will allow them to create some new employment opportunities to address a significant need. So again, we're here in support of funding or fully funding or increasing funding to the Central California SPCA, because it is a need that's been voiced repeatedly by community residents in many of the districts, in particular disadvantaged locations of the city. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the budget item that's before us right now, general city purpose? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close it. I do have, you're punched up first, Member Capriolio, but I do wish to address the item of animal control. The current situation, what's that? Yeah, we're fixing it right now. It's going to be better than ever. You know what? There is a problem. It is a phone call that we receive in my office actually quite frequently, and you guys are right on. These are people who are kids who are walking to school predominantly are dealing with these issues of packs of dogs that are chasing them and terrifying them. And it is all over, but predominantly in neighborhoods in the South. So you've got the problem identified perfectly. The SPCA was given a $1 million increase, about 4 years ago? 4 years ago, they were given about $1 million a year. So if they're telling you that the issue is money, it may be part of the problem. It may be part of the solution. But they are getting a $100,000 increase in this budget. And I can assure you that their only problem is not money. The SPCA has a number of issues in regards to the service that they provide. Can our constituents get through to them? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Can our council offices get through to them? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. This organization has some serious issues in terms of responding to the concerns of constituents in the districts, and it also has a number of issues just responding to city staff that need to reach out to them to report something. So I will tell you that people are talking about animal control, and people are talking about the SPCA, and there are people within this organization that are looking at and solving some of those problems. It has maybe a little to do with money, but mostly it has to do with the lack of accountability that the SPCA has. They don't have we don't have a direct pipeline to them in terms of communication, and we don't have a member of this organization on that board, despite the fact that we give them over $3 million a year. So most of their operations are funded by the taxpayer. The taxpayer has no way to hold this organization accountable. So sure, money may be part of the picture, but the reality is that there's a problem that exists, that's existed for many years with that organization and accountability. So that's something that we're trying to fix right now, and hopefully we'll get that done. So I thank you all for your comments. Member Capriolio, you're first.
Thank you. Addressing B79, two areas I wanted to go into. One, it says Kaiser Park project. Is that a one-time appropriation, or what kind of project is it, if someone knows?
Yes, that is a one-time appropriation.
And it is for what purpose?
So last year, we have an issue out at Kaiser Park in which the facility that was used previously to support the Little League and other activities at the park was sold. There was an adjacent business, and that was sold. That business owner put the league and other users on notice that they could no longer use the parking lot. We set aside funding last year to do some preliminary design and set aside money to help fund the construction of a parking facility at the park. This other $100,000 will go in as a match. Council District 6 also set money aside for this, and then the league is going to be contributing to the construction of this parking lot. In addition, the league, and we'll be coming to council probably within the next week or two with a number of agreements, but the league, in consideration of this investment, is going to take over the ongoing maintenance of the remaining green space. But what is more important and exciting is that they have also agreed to establish a challenger league out at Inspiration Park. Council, as you recall, we made a significant investment in a baseball field that was designed specifically for people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. It has been woefully underutilized. And so in consideration of this investment, the league is also, in addition to funding the ongoing cost to maintain the green space at Kaiser Park, has also agreed, and we've met with Resources Independence California, that they will establish a formal challenger league out at Inspiration Park, sponsor league games as well as tournaments and things of that nature. So that item will be coming to council in the next couple of weeks.
And last year's budget number was how much?
$100,000.
Okay, so we're at 200 out of the general fund.
Correct.
Okay. Then I wanted to jump down to Fresno mobile app outreach. And are we adding other services? Some people here mentioned animal control services. Are we in the process of adding direct contact through Fresno and you with the public, police department, homelessness? Is there a way we can do the Fresno app and then shoot it to you and police or whomever is the appropriate agency to resolve the issue? Any ideas on that, Bruce?
We have added some, additional requests, such as we delineated between oversized vehicles recently versus abandoned vehicles. We could certainly add other things to that list. Personally, I think that the challenge for us right now is as we keep adding things to the list, it's beginning to impact our ability to effectively address those things that are already on the list. So there are certainly opportunities going forward, but I would just ask council's patience to let us deal with with those issues that have already been identified. For example, the abandoned vehicle issue. We have a strategy to address that, but if I look at each of the council districts, except for District 6, for example, I can tell you that abandoned vehicles across the city is the number one issue coming out of the Fresco app. And so, followed by street trees and sidewalks, existing sidewalks that are damaged.
Right.
So I'm meeting with, in fact, I'm meeting later on today with both the Public Works Director as well as the DARM Director to get at the street trees, the street sidewalk, or street trees, sidewalks, and abandoned vehicles. Because again, if I look across all 7 districts, except for D6, abandoned vehicles, sidewalks, and street trees are the top 3 priorities across the board.
Hopefully we can maybe go Fresgo App 2 or a sub-part of it and keep it going, because it is a very effective program. And I appreciate the oversized vehicle, abandoned vehicle. That's why I drafted that ordinance to implement and help us get that problem under control. And I'm glad to hear we're doing a great job toward that. So thank you. That's all I have.
Couple questions, and I did want to add to the comments made by my colleague on the SPCA. But I did first, before saying, because I do agree with a number of the comments, we also get a ton of complaints to our office, not just about loose dogs, but I will say the poor service or lack of service at many times that our residents get or don't get when they're trying to call the SPCA number. Sometimes they never even get a live person. So it gives me a lot of heartburn to see that we pay $3.8 million out of our general fund and the quality of service isn't up to par, at least to in my perspective. I did have a couple of questions for, I don't know if it's for the administration. Do you guys know how much of the $3.8 million that the SPCA allocates for education, awareness, spay, neutering, immunization, and microchip campaigns? Do we know?
We can follow up and get that information to you.
I would love to get that information to see kind of the breakdown. And then also, do we get an annual report from them about the services that they perform?
They give us a report related to the number of animals that they have been brought in, how many have been adopted, medical expenses, and things of that nature.
So we do, you're saying? I've never seen that come to council.
We can forward them to you.
They do come to
Yes.
council? Okay.
They don't come to council.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion that on an annual basis, if we're allocating a 3.8, that they do an annual report to the city council as to the services. And I'd like to see that, the
Second.
outreach component on that, because I think we need more accountability.
Okay.
I'll second. And just kind of interrupt to piggyback. Do we get a copy of their budget? Do they submit a budget?
They submitted to us their line item and where those increases were. So that was the basis of this request.
Can we include that in your motion?
Yeah, that would be great.
Because then that'll tell us exactly what. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. The other question that I had on the line item related to cable nonprofit media, JPA. So there's a line item on special projects. We've seen over the last couple years, the actuals have been around $800,000, but in the last 2 years, we've continued to see an increase up to $1 million. Just wondering, what is it, and maybe you guys can explain to me, what is it that we do with these dollars?
The special projects encompasses a lot of different things. There are that's where the CDBG repayment is contained, and that has increased in FY17. It was $350,000, I believe, because council made a motion to alter that last year. It is now back up to the $500,000. That also contains the money that was outlined for the Fresco outreach. It also contains work for the phase 1 of the West Area Specific Plan north of Shaw. It contains money.
I think we're talking about 2 different line items.
No, it's special projects 58004.
That's not the media one?
The media.
Yeah, cable, PG,
Oh,
nonprofit.
I'm sorry. No, that's a pass-through. That's a pass-through to CMAQ.
But in the last 2 years, the actuals have only been 867,000. Then even 2016, 749,000. But we've continued to see
That's based upon franchise fees that come in from the cable system.
But why would we allocate 300,000 more when we've seen in the past 2 years an actual decrease rather than an increase? I wouldn't feel comfortable doing an increase.
Yeah, and I don't know what the details of that agreement are, but that's basically the PEG fees that come in from the franchise fee from the franchisees. And they are passed through.
Right, they come from the state. So we're just projecting what's going to come into the state, but we're only going to allocate what comes in. So this
we're only going to transfer what actually comes in, but we
Right.
transfer over to CMAQ.
Right.
Okay, so there may be some leftover money again.
No.
No?
That's the franchise fees that is specific for the PEG, and those monies come in separately, and they are put into that separate fund because then they're segregated and they can be they're transferred over to CMAQ.
So for 2017, right now we have spent already $1 million. Is that what that number reflects?
We have transferred over it. No, that's the amended budget. But I suspect that we probably spent upwards of. We've transferred over upwards of $1 million. We don't actually spend anything. We just transfer the money over to CMAQ.
Why was it an increase in cost? I guess I'm trying to
So
figure
these-
out because it went a few $100,000 more.
These are dollars that everyone pays on their cable bill that are collected by the state of California.
Come to
And
the city.
then they're transferred to us, and then we, by under law, transfer it to CMAQ, which is the designated community media access collaborative, the nonprofit that was established, whose sole purpose is to provide community programming.
Is that the only entity that we're allowed to work with?
Yes, that's the only entity that's been established to receive these funds.
And do we get an opportunity to see how they expend those funds? Does it matter? Do we care?
You could.
Do we have any influence in how,
Well,
if we are trying to do an outreach campaign and trying to get messages out, are we using CMAQ effectively? Since we are to some degree.
Other than the council meetings, and if you watch the community access channel, I know Public Utilities does advertisement. The fire department does advertisement about smoke alarms and things of that
Do
nature.
they charge us, or is it
No,
already
it's-
included
it's
in this
part
price?
of that cost.
Okay.
So if there are some other outreach strategies that you'd like to discuss with them, we can certainly facilitate that
Okay.
conversation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think those were all the. Oh, one last thing on the. Also, the general city purpose. I was just wondering. I know that it's not. There's no money proposed for this year, but wondering on the amended to 2017 item of land acquisition, what were we buying? It's 399,000.
Well, that was put in there via a council resolution, an AR. I'm trying to think what that was, what that land acquisition was for. Lot 2? It was
Lot
for
2.
Lot 2.
Lot 2.
Okay.
Lot 2, the infamous Lot 2.
Okay, so that's the money that we paid for it.
Yes.
Okay, and if we ever get rid of it, it comes back to general fund.
Yes.
Okay. One other question on the, where is it? Oh, the outside agency support, 450. I'm just wondering, I know that this year we have allocated 225,000.
Yeah, there is, that is the Granite Park contract. That's 150,000.
The what?
The Granite Park contract, the one that's been approved with the Central Valley Community Sports Foundation. They actually, I believe, have a contract with the city to run that facility and to maintain it.
Oh, that's the 150,000.
Yes,
included in that.
that's part of the 450,000.
And
Then you also have the Kaiser Park match. I believe that's already been discussed. That was 100,000. And then there's also some work, I believe, some work on necessary work on Fulton Street that's also been budgeted in there for $200,000. That's the PBID work that's going to be done next year. So that's
what is that? What work?
I believe it's
That's the cost of making sure that the investment that we made is maintained. Things like fountains. What's that? Oh, yeah. Oh, and the artwork.
So 200,000.
Yes, for fountains, artwork maintenance, things like that.
It'd probably be good if maybe some of those items are flushed out so that we know. Because I know that you guys just highlighted a few like Granite Park, Kaiser, and so forth. But by looking at this, we don't know how you guys are expending those dollars. I think that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Screen is clear. That concludes budget for today. See you all back here tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning.
No, 10.
Huh?
10 o'clock.
I've got Wednesday, June 14th at... Is it at 10 o'clock?
I think it's...
All right. We'll see you tomorrow at 10.